I don't know. I was born in Lula, Mississippi, which is in Coahoma County, and I guess in 1933, wasn't any expectation of anything different from what all other black people at that particular time. At that particular time, people wanted to be called colored people, or either just Negroes or something like that. So I was born on a plantation, and my father was, when I can remember, you know, I always looked up to him because I guess he had so much love for me, and I could feel that, you know, all the time in my life, starting off. And my mother, she was the same, you know. They tell stories about what I used to do when I was small, and so one day I was walking down the road because we didn't have streets or anything, and she was saying, "Come on, baby," you know, and wanted me to walk, and the dust was hot, and I said, "Shoots, girl, you better tote me," and she said, "Well, okay," you know, and so she picked me up and carried me for a while, and then she put me down and coaxed me to walk, and she tells it from a standpoint that that I always spoke out for, demanded what it is that I wanted, and I don't know. I have aunts and my father, and all of them tell different stories about me, and I can remember doing some of those things, like I would climb trees and paint my face, you know, out of my aunt's white powder, because at that particular time, black people didn't have the browns and all these different color powders. Now it was some white powder that the white people used, and so she had a box of that, and I'd go paint that and put on some real red lipstick, and the color of my skin, as dark as I was in white powder and real red lipstick, and they said I was, I guess, trying to be ladylike and yet climbing trees, and that was a picture that they would see me up the tree, you know, and painted my face and have lipsticks and so on. I felt that my mother and my father loved me. I came up with a bunch of my sister and my cousins, and so I came out of I guess what people would call Monahan came out a report a long time ago, talked about that extended family. So I came from my cousins. My first cousins was like my sisters and brothers, and my aunts and uncles was another set of parents, and my grandmother was the person that everybody looked up to. She kept the money of the family in what they used to call a nation sack, and I don't know why they called it that, but it was made out of cotton sacks. They used to call it like a crook sack material, and she would sew it and had it round her waist, and that's where she wore it. She kept the money, the little that we had, but it was all family money. That one stayed in one house, the other stayed in the other one. People would walk down there in at crop time and do that. I can remember some of that. And I had a grandfather. They used to call him Chalk Chalk because he was part Indian, and he was a quiet man. You know, I guess I don't know whether he was full-blooded or half or whatever there was, but it was my grandmother's husband, and he was another kind of a caring person. He would take us out to now you would call it a truck patch, but in the fields. And he grew a lot of watermelons and vegetables and stuff like that. And he would have you walking, you know, behind him, and you felt with his stature, and me as a child, I can talk about the way I felt, you know. And he said, "Baby, look over there and get you one of those watermelons." And then he told me to ball up my fists and hit which one you want, and pick out the one you want. And, he knew which one was right, but I didn't. But he would point this way. "Oh, how about that one right there? I want that one." "Oh, okay. Did you say that one or that one?" You know, until he got me to hit the right one. And I remember hitting this, and it bust wide open, and it was just red, you know, on the inside. And he just says, "Put your hand down in that and just sit right there and eat it as much as you want." And I was so excited that I had picked the right watermelon, you know. And it was those kind of times. It was that stays in my memory, you know.
Had your grandparents, had they lived there in that area for a while, so their roots were Tacoma County?
Yes, yes. That's on my mother's side of the family. On my father's side of the family is a whole different group. My father came from Louisiana. That's the last. My granddaddy on my father's side was in Louisiana, and they told us the story about what happened to him. He worked in the fields, sugarcane fields, and he ran into a problem because he was a person that spoke up, and he came up missing. And we know that they killed him. White people, and my grandmother was left with 3 children. And she was a guess under kind of a slavery type thing, because she had to work in the house. And but she was what people call Creole, and she spoke French. And but she took my father and my aunt and her next child, which is Uncle Joe, was born afterwards. It was 3 of them. It was just 3 of them. And she brought Aunt Rosetta and my father and Uncle Tommy to Mississippi, because her brother came up and got her, because families used to do that, take care of one another, you know, and sisters get left or something bad happened to the family, and, you know, the rest of them go get them. And that's how my father got to Mississippi. My mother was born in Lombardy, Mississippi, in the hills. That's what she said. And so I guess my grandmother came from that area. I'm going to find out for sure. And on my mother's side, So this was where people lived, you know, in Coahoma County, trying to, it was a lot of, when I was coming up, people moved a lot, looking for a better place for the white man to treat them better. You know, if he treated them nice and didn't take all the work, because it was sharecropping. My father was a sharecropper. And but he got into it with the man that he was sharecropping with, and they had a dispute, and a lot of it is because the man told him that, you know, what I should do in the field, and my mother and my father said that he was the head of the house, and so I saw my father stand up to a white man, which is next to death. I mean, you know, you just soon to get killed or whatever, and that was passed down through the family. You know that all these things has happened when I was a little bitty girl, and so he went to Memphis, Tennessee, and so that means that I was raised up between Coahoma County, Mississippi, and Memphis, Tennessee, and I went to school in Helena, Arkansas.
Wow.
West Helena, Arkansas. And that's a long story with that part too. You know how that, because by us being on the plantation and going from place to place, we was with our grandmother, and my mother would go back and forth to Memphis, and my father couldn't come back on account of what had happened. And then another uncle had to leave, which he just died last year. He had to leave also, because you couldn't talk back to, you couldn't look a white person in the face, and you couldn't say anything back, or if they tell you to do something, you just had to do it, you know. And Uncle Thomas said he couldn't go no further, so he got him away to Memphis, Tennessee also. So that's where a lot of the families moved, and so I raised up between Memphis, Tennessee, and Lula, Mississippi, and Helena, Arkansas.
Let's stop here just a second. Okay. So, so you spent a lot of your time both in Lula and Memphis and
Helena, West Helena, Arkansas.
Helena.
Helena, West Helena, Arkansas.
Did you move during the course of each year, or would sometimes you would spend summers back in Mississippi in school? You said.
No, the way it was is that you would pick cotton. Start in August, because people used to start picking cotton in August. When I was, 8, 9, 10, so even before I was able to get out in the field and pick a lot of cotton, I was the water girl. So you take the water to the fields, and then I was the babysitter. So I kept my cousins, and I would sit with them, and keep the younger ones. So you had a job, you always had a job. You always had to work. We would stay until October 1st. By October 1st, we would be in West Helena, Arkansas, seeing about Annie, named Big 80. We'd call her Big 80. She had a tumor, but we didn't know that's what it was. And one time, we thought that she was what folks used to call in family way. Some of these words just done passed on now, but she never had the baby. So then we found out what it was a tumor. But every year at the same time, my sister and I would come over, to West Helena, Arkansas, go to school, until we moved over there. And that's how my mother was going to make sure that we learned how to read and write, and arithmetic. That's what mother used to say. Because my mother was caught in a situation where she didn't get to school. And that was the era, because we've been through these different eras. Now, my grandmother could read and write, and that was another era. Because she was a great cook, and she worked in the white people's houses, and so she learned. The woman taught her because of the recipes and a whole lot of other stuff that she told her that she'd ask, "How you fix that, mammy?" Mama used to tell us the story. She said, "Ma'am, I don't know. I just put a little bit of this and a little bit of that." And so she say, "Well, you need to just tell me how to do it." She said, "Well, I can't read and I can't write." So she says, "Well, we're just going to make sure you learn how to read and write so we can get it down." Because she was a great cook. And that's what happened to my grandmother. And so then here's another group comes along, another generation, and that's when it then clamped down, made sure that, you know, we didn't go to school and that kind of type thing. So my mother was going to make sure we learned how to read and write, because there were schools going on, but we was on a plantation, more or less, starting off, and you just didn't go to school in Mississippi, but 2 months or 3 months out of the year. You know, if the cotton wasn't in season and wasn't time for the pick, or wasn't time for to chop, then they'd let you go to school maybe a couple of months. And most of the time that would be around about January, February, and then March there was time to plow again, so children had to stay at home and take care of children and do all kinds of things. So it was a process that she wasn't pleased with, my mother. And so she came up with this idea that, you know, you go see about the MBA. And we went every year, see about the MBA.
So starting when you were, like, time to go to school. So you never went to school in Mississippi at all?
No, not till I done some work at Mississippi Valley State.
Yeah.
But
that's a great.
But that's what happened. I didn't go to school. I went to school in West Allen, Arkansas. I just so strange that when you said that, I was thinking about my teacher, because that's a story within itself. I just went to see her this past weekend.
Oh, so you still
one of my teachers.
What was she like? What was her name too?
Miss Franklin. Yeah, she was the person I guess was very highlighted in my life. My
Tell us
teacher.
a little bit about. Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Well, Miss Franklin was. I think about Miss Buckhallen was my first grade teacher, and she was a warm, light, brown-skinned woman, but she was very warm-hearted and so she stands out in my mind. You know, when I first started school, I think you need a teacher, a very warm teacher when you're first starting off in school, and it was at a church, behind a church, more or less kind of like a church thing in West Helena. And the next one, there was several of them, but that outstanding in my life is Miss Franklin. And she was the one told me I could speak and make sure that that I would go to the podium scared to death every assembly and stand there with my hands, you know, locked in like this, and to say some kind of a speech. And the only thing I can remember now is I used to have to turn my head and say, and smile, and smile, you know, and do that. But she encouraged me, and she also, it was interesting because that she asked me what was my name, and I said UZ, and she says, well, you can't, that's an alphabet. You can't get through the world with those alphabets. And she found an old book of some kind. I can remember the book was, well, a lot of our books was old because we didn't get the good books from down to the white schools. But, and she found my name, and she was finding the part that goes to the initials. So I became Unita and Zelma. And my mother, I took it home and showed her my name, and she said, well, I guess the teacher knows, but I'll still call you UZ. Because my uncle named me UZ. Uncle Sonny Boy. We call him Uncle Sonny Boy. His name was John, but you know, we had those nicknames. And they used to call me Two Bits because I was very small. I wish I was back to that, but anyway. He named a lot of us. He named my cousins AQ and UZ, and he was the namer, you know, in the family. And then another thing, he I guess he done that because he named my sister Augusta because he wanted to go to Augusta, Georgia. He had heard about that and things like that. But he wasn't a person who could read and write or anything like that. But he could count. Oh, he could figure in his head more than anybody you've ever seen. So that was the way it was, and he was her oldest brother, and in our families, the older brothers, you know, had certain kinds of control and say-sos and all that kind of stuff. Even the husbands let the brothers speak, and you know, it's all kinds of things. But I don't think we're doing this now in this generation. But that sort of way you come up with people who had authority, who was respected in the family. So he named the children. He named his brothers and sisters' children. He had one sister, and he had one brother, and he named the children. This was his nieces and nephews. So some of the rest of them put some name to their names too, you know. But Miss Franklin stands out in my mind. And then she encouraged me. She used to say that I was smart, and so she encouraged me to do my work.
How was going? That I mean, that's a fairly good sized town, West Helena.
West Helena,
yeah,
at that time in Helena, Arkansas.
Yeah, I mean, those were. How did you feel going into the city, or kind of the city every year after living in a rural part of Mississippi?
I guess it's interesting, you know, what you just asked me because I never thought about it before. I know that we had to go, come home back to Mississippi to help with the crop, and it was just part of what you did. And then you know that you were going to go to school, and that was part of what you did, you know. And I guess you like to go to town because you'd see things, you know. But I used to go, I liked to go with Aunt Rosie, which is another one of my uncle's wives, to Lula, you know, because we had one time they had moved from where I was born, which is right upside of Lula. It's there now, but we had moved by 5 miles because my sister was saying the other day that we saw the Highway 61 being built, you know.
Is that right? Oh.
And she's 4 years older than I. And we was children, you know, and used to. So we stayed on the other side of the Highway 61 and would see all these people, you know, with all this stuff out there. You know, they had a lot of manual labor at that time. So we would walk up into the little town part, because it wasn't incorporated, I don't think, at that time, to a Chinaman store, and that's when I first met Chinese. It was in Lula, and it was the Lee's Grocery, and so you'd go in there, and he would be so gracious, you know. He talked funny and no, you know, something, and we didn't know what it was, and we'd laugh at it, you know. But I would go to town and pick up freshness, we used to call it. Freshness was stuff like sausages, smoked sausages, or lunch meat, or stuff like that, because we killed hogs and had all the things that we would salt it down and all that, so that meat that wasn't salted down was called freshness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the reason why. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's so many words and different things that we use that I know I have to get it down. I have to tell somebody about it.
Yeah,
because,
no, that's right.
a lot of people don't even know what a lot of those things meant, and now young people need to know that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go, first she would get some brown paper on a Saturday night, Friday night, because we know we was going Saturday. And like the brown paper bag, and she would wrap her hair, and that's how she curled her hair, you know. She'd wrap it in a brown paper bag and tie it, and take the pieces of it and strip it and just wrap it, and it would give it the crinkles in the hair, you know.
Mm-hmm.
She'd hot comb it, and then she'd put that in there, and I know she was getting ready to go. So I was going to figure out how to be, you know, the person to help her with the paper and do everything that's necessary to make sure that I walk with her, because it's 5 miles we got to walk to town. And so I enjoyed going to town, you know, once a week.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometime we wouldn't get a chance to go that week, we get next week.
Mm-hmm.
And when I walk into the Chinaman store, you know, he'd go to saying something in Chinese, and then he'd call me and pat me and tell me to put my hand down in this barrel, which was pickles. And I'd run my hand down there and come out with a pickle, and she would try to go in her pocket to pay. And he'd, no, give me a pickle. And then we'd buy 10 cents worth of cheese, and he'd cut a great big hunk. And that's what I remember, you know, the first encounter. Then when we would go to Arkansas, that was called Wings Chinaman store. And it was on the corner. And my aunt, she would send us up there, and that's when we would have our treat, which is ice cream or something like that. And I never could understand why this lady would, one day I'd see her, and the next time I look around she had a baby, you know, and it looked like she never got any bigger. But it's just those kinds of things that you remember in your childhood. And but we was always treated kind by the Chinese, and they came from Canton, they said, and at that time Taiwan and something else they used to talk about.
So it gave you a choice between, you didn't have to just shop at the plantation store. I mean, you had a kind of people who you could...
Well, when you go into, that's when I come along, a lot of people, we did have what they call a store that you had to go to get the basics, like the flour and the meals and all that, if you didn't have money. But my grandmother was the kind of person that would save the money, you know, whatever money was made. If it's $300 for the whole year, or $200, then you get a barrel of flour, and a barrel of, you know, a whole thing of flour was the barrel, and then a thing of sugar, we raised the corn, and the corn would be ground up at the mill. So you go and I'd set up a mini nights and shell corn by the tubs full, you know. That was fun too, you know. Now you just sit there and shell corn, you wear out, but you know, and then we take it down there, and they put it in the grist mill and grind it, and that's what you cooked your cornbreads and things out of. So what you bought was very limited. It was sugar and flour and things like freshness and cheese, and that's what I can remember that we bought, because we always had to kill hogs, and my grandmother would can a lot of stuff, you know, and vegetables and that kind of type thing. Gravy, and give you a little dab of something, and then you have plenty gravy, and then you have biscuits, you know, a big pan of biscuits, and you felt like you was had plenty because you had biscuits left over, you know, those great big, and she'd make them, they used to call them cat heads. The reason why they call them that, you know, is hit and it'd be crinkle in the front, you know, they just take the biscuit and she'd cut it off and then just do it that way. and long black pants. And I don't know, I just think about some of the incidents. I was sitting on the back porch when the porch, it was kind of the back of the house where you sit, the step go down, because we only had a front porch. And I had one of these cold biscuits in my hand, sitting there meditating or whatever I was doing, just kind of gnawing on the biscuit and just kind of off, and the chicken came up and took my biscuit out of my hand, and I took off behind that chicken and run him, and my grandmother was screaming, you know, there's a whole pan of biscuits in there, you know, but I'm behind this one chicken and took my biscuit. And I ran that chicken to death till he gapped and gapped for his breath. I just run him to death, and he died. And my grandmother gave me the goodest spanking you ever seen. But I put that too, that I really didn't like people taking anything away from me. I thought it was very interesting. As I get older, you know, I look back and says, you know, I've been had this a long time. I got problems, you know. But I remember that, you know, that was, or maybe it's because that I like to eat, or I don't know what it was. But it's my grandmother. People used to give you spankings, you know. I mean, you just didn't get away with doing something that wasn't what you're supposed to have been doing. And so she gave me a good spanking. And I remember one time I was a little girl, and we had to go to church. And that church is still in Lula. Call it Bethlehem. And my sister and I, she was about 12 and I was about 8. And we was singing a solo. And she told me to sing solo. And I said, no, we're going to sing a duet. And she and I was going to sing this duet. And that was the first time I sung. Remember me singing outside of, you know, in the house. So we in church, and I started off with the song, and my sister said she messed it up, but I don't remember that. But we sung the song, and it's those kinds of incidents that I remember.
Do you? Earlier, you're talking about your father standing up to one of the owners and saying, "No, you can't tell me how my wife and my daughter are going to work," and was forced to leave, and later an uncle was forced to leave. Do you remember any stories about that, family conversations about those moments as well?
Well, that's what the family would discuss it, you know, and talk about. My father was called Jake. Jake, that was his nickname. His name is Willie Brown. The Jake don't take no foolishness, you know. And then they would tell incidents. My father was a quiet man. He never done a lot of talking, you know, and you could get along with him, but he didn't take any foolishness. That's what the family would discuss. And my uncles, I always knew that they were people who didn't just let people push them around. You know, they didn't care what color you were. They just wasn't going to take it. Now, they didn't pick a fight or didn't do anything, but the people felt that these was men. They talked about it in the family. You know, it just got passed around. And there was men that just didn't let you just push them too far. They was hard-working people, and they talked about that. You know, my father worked hard. My uncles, they plowed mules, and wasn't no tractors. You know, and they had to walk behind these mules. And tractors came in later, but one or two. So it was always a discussion around that, you know, that, and people just was trying to escape, you know, and so when one would get up a certain age, then they would try to leave and go to a better place or find a better job. My father found a job at the Ice House on Lauderdale in Memphis, Tennessee, and that was a good job. You know, it paid something much more. And Uncle Tommy ended up working cleaning, becoming something like janitors at WREC TV, and over the years. But before then, he was cleaning, going to white people houses, cleaning, you know, the rugs and all that other kind of stuff. And they had a truck. The company hired him, and that was to them a good paying job, you know. And then he got a job on the railroad. And so when the time came, which he just died last year, he had a good Social Security, because some people didn't get any. They used to wouldn't may like they was taking it out and kept the money, but he worked for the railroad, and so. And then I had my baby uncle, which was not completely caught up in all of the early ones. He worked for Firestone, so he did well. We were so excited over him. We didn't know what to do, because he bought a house. You know, he was one of the first one to bought a house. And so I kind of cried when his wife died. And so his daughter had to sell the house. She said she had her own house, so she didn't need the house. And but I just know about that house. That was the first house, you know. And she kept it up. I mean, it looked like 30 years ago or whatever when they bought it, you know, and they finally got a chance to get that house. He was the first one that got owed enough money to pay down on the house. Then my daddy finally got a small house, you know, and one did it, another did it. Uncle Tommy, he went over there, and that house, I still have to check on that house. It's one still there. It's been there since the 40s. But that Aunt Rosetta bought. She got it. It's an old house, but they bought it, you know. So that was they was what I call people who wanted to have something.
Very industrious.
Yeah, and I had an aunt, and this furniture and stuff that was passed down. She worked in a laundry, which was a fantastic thing. You know, coming from Mississippi, she went up and started ironing in a laundry, and she started to buy furniture that now would cost a lot of money. You know, and pieces. You know.
Yeah. I was curious as well. It strikes me that this your mother and father tried to figure out a way to have you spend time in school, and this strategy to go visit your aunt during certain times. Did you all talk about that as a strategy to get you in school, or was it more like you're just going to visit your aunts and your parents knew that? Do you remember any thought or conversations around that?
Well, it was a strategy between. A lot of the older people did not talk to the children and go into details with the children. They would talk and you listen. You know, you hear it and you hear and don't hear. But it was set up where that every year, as my mother would say, and my grandmother was with it. That Augusta and Unita, at that time they called me UC, was going to learn how to read and write and arithmetic. And how the best way to do it, to send her to Effie, because that was the name of my aunt. Send her over to Effie, and Effie Pinkston was my aunt. And she was a person who could read and write. And she took my sister and wanted to teach piano, you know, and very poor woman, but had musical something. She had her stepson played the piano, and just like it sounded like opera or something, the way they played the piano. So she was going to teach my sister how to play piano and stuff like that. She was a seamster. She could sew beautiful clothes, make clothes and stuff. And so we was to go to, and she was classified, she was in town, you know, she was in West Elm, Arkansas. And that's the way it was, you know, they come up with the strategy to make sure that we would not have to sit there in Mississippi and wait till the man say that it's okay for us to go to school. And so Annie would get sick every year, same time. About last September, Annie was getting sick. And so until we moved from Mississippi, you know, because it took a long process for some all that to happen. And my mother and I was in Tennessee. You know, I would go up there and stay with my daddy and my mama, and so I was raised between those. That's the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And I remember catching the buses and stuff like that. But we catch the ferry to go from get in a wagon, and they take us down to the river, and then you wait till the ferry comes, and so you get on the ferry, and you ride across the Mississippi River, and Annie would be over there waiting on us, and take us on. We catch the bus, and go to West Helena.
Oh, what an adventure.
Yes.
Stop just for a second.
All right, we're
Your time in, I'm just thinking just quickly about some more background in this rural area. What kinds of, was it the institutions like the church and stuff important there? Did you was that a place where people could meet and talk and share things and get some
I was raised up with going to church. The women in our family, you know, was the ushers, the mothers of the church. My grandmother was the mother of the church, and the next generation would either sing in the choir or whatever. But when that's the reason why we was, my sister and I, when I can remember when I was about 8 years old, standing up trying to do it, because we was raised up in church. That was the outlet. It was two things that I guess that people did, and that was on the Saturday nights. They went out if they were men folks, and if you was a lady, I can remember that you only go into town like Aunt Rosa did, and people would come up and ask you, did you want a treat? A treat was, would you like a treat, Miss Holmes, or whatever your name was, you know, and the guys would offer you a treat, and it was not being nasty or trying to flirt or do anything like that. It's just the way people did, you know. They come up, and this way men showed their manhood, and they would come up and ask you, would you like a treat? And she'd say yes or no. Thank you. And they'd buy you a Coke, or some people back then, you know, maybe wanted a beer or whatever they was having. And that's about the level that things were, because women didn't be out, you know, at night, late at night. If you did, you was classified. I mean, real classified. And you was raised up like that. And we went to church. Church was an activity where that a lot of the leadership was developed from the church, because there was no other place for it to develop. You learn how to speak in the church, you learn how to sing, you learn how to, you know, talk to people, do plays. The only other thing that was kind of related was auxiliaries. Like they would come up with clubs that would meet in the church, you know. societies, like they would create societies where they would bury people, because a lot of people would die and didn't have money to bury themselves, and so if you pay 25 cents a month and you belong to the society, they'd meet and talk about things, and that's way that people.
Was a lot of that when you moved into the city? Was that there too? I mean,
Yeah. See, when you moved into the city, I think that one of the things that we always, the black community was made up of its own culture, and that culture was developed out of the church, a lot of it. And if you went to the cities, you would find the same kinds of things, where that the churches was bigger maybe, and people was a little cittier. But that whole development came out of the church and out of clubs and I would say that's the root. That was the root of the development of a community. And I think that that's one of the things that, as I look back on my life and over the series of things that has happened, even in the civil rights movement, that people latched on to things because that it was tied around our church. White people church was different. They went in at 11, was out at 12, and we went in at 9, starting off 9:30 Sunday school. You finish Sunday school and you stand around. Then you start service, and it goes from 11 till 2 when people get through shouting, or whoever, and then we have dinner. You brought your dinner and you cooked, and folks would have, stuff on the yard. And then they go back into service. The 6 o'clock was BTU, and that's Baptist Training Union for people who don't know what that is. For us, and then you go to night service, and it would last, it's causing away. If you was in town, it would last maybe till 10 o'clock, 9 or 10 o'clock. But if you was in the rural area, like I was, we'd be finished, so we could walk home, and get home around about 10. So you had to stop. So it's that kind of that was what the community was built up around. Now, even if the people bootleg whiskey, sold whiskey, or whatever, they was protected, I might say, or whispered about whatever was happening, but they were sinful even. The church molded that whole situation on how people should act, because people sell whiskey at the church. You'd be kind of ways out, but they would be standing around out there, and the ones that drink that knows that they was to pick up their bottle or whatever, and it was interesting. And the bootleggers was never, because Mississippi, I guess, was dry and stayed that way for a long time. The bootleggers sometimes would get up if some white person came to the door and stuck their head in the door. They knew, that person wanted to pick up 2 or 3 gallons of liquor, and so they would, tip on out and go get it and come back and sit back there and rock, right straight through the whole thing, And people sort of just kind of turned their head and went on, But it was a way of life. And I think that that's what's missing, the lack of understanding of white America, of what happens in the black community, and how that people don't see things the same way, you know, and they're not taught, because it was the law himself was coming at the whiskey sometime, you know what I'm saying, to pass it along. And so it was what has been taught in our society, you know, and what is right, and how was the money, how was the survival. The survival was there. And but you know, mostly any upstanding person that was in the community and had little extras and stuff like that, we knew they were bootleggers, you know, or something. Then everybody, don't care how Christian you was and wonderful you was, everybody had made wine. And my folks, you know, they just didn't think nothing about that. I mean, I climb trees and pull down muscadines and grapes and everything every year, you know, to collect it and take it home. And my grandmother could make wine. That was for Christmas, you know, and it was a ritual that you did that. And peaches, you saved all the hulls, and then that you made brandy and just everything. So, and jelly, and it just was you didn't throw away nothing,
right?
You know, and the woods. Now I know most of our young people don't even know what's in the woods. You know, I used to know for headaches, what was good for this, what was good for that, and so on. You know, because there wasn't any way to go to the doctor. You didn't have any money. And my grandmother was a doctor, you know, both of them. You know, the other one, she came out of Louisiana, and this one was in the hills of Mississippi, and they'd sit down and mix their medicines and talk about, you know, what was the best one for what.
So they got together like that?
They knew one another, you know. My grandmother on my mother's side was also delivered I don't know how many babies, and I found myself doing that one time here, because I didn't know I still knew.
Did you go with your?
No, it's just, you know, we'd sit down and talk about it. When I was a little girl, they wouldn't allow you. But after you got older, and Mama used to sit around and talk about it, and she was still trying to deliver babies, even in Arkansas. She moved to Arkansas. She'd go and somebody was going to have babies. That style is back, you know. It went out and it's back, that you deliver babies, you know, by natural birth, childbirth. And so she was a midwife also.
Well, that's fine. Was moving to town then was, of course you moved back and forth, so that you never really lost the connection with your rural life. And
yes, you know, I never knew that it was disconnected.
That's,
you know,
that's
what it's interesting that's coming up now. See, I was always rural because you went to town, but even in town, I did the same thing. Like the difference was that when we moved over to stay longer periods of time, that I would catch the truck and go pick cotton. Or you catch the truck and go to hoe, you know, when hoeing time comes. So you never really disconnected from the work of the field and the way of life that people thought. Because everybody that was mostly in the little small towns also just came from the plantation.
Was Memphis different than that though when you went to?
I stayed in what they call an elephant flat. They call it the White Elephant Flat on Wellington Street. my mother and I was talking about this the other day. I used to go and sit out on the front. You know, they had it was stoops on the flats, and it had a lot of apartments in it, and they call it the White Elephant Flat. And I remember that's one time my aunt, because I was the only child on my father's side, that at that time it was only me. So my aunt didn't have but one niece, and my uncles one niece, and my daddy one me, and so she had me in Memphis, and she bought me a white dress and for Easter, and with a lot of ruffles all the way. You know, people used to wear ruffles, and she got me some red ribbon and some white ribbon, and she dressed me up. And my father got terribly upset because he said he'd buy his own clothes for his own child. You know, that kind of stuff. It's really interesting.
Your education then, so you started, so you were starting to go in West Helena.
Yeah, I went to school in West Helena. I went to school a little in Memphis, Tennessee, and that's the two pieces that I did before, and I taught my mother how to read and write, because I love to read all the time. I read anything and everything. I'm fascinated with reading. She would see me all the time with a book, you know, and so forth. She says, you know, I think I want to learn to do that. And so I started off teaching my mother how to read, and so now she can read some to her Bible, and she feels very good about it. She can even write a letter, because they say I can understand any kind of writing, but she writes me a letter sometime, and it makes me feel real good. But I did a lot of self-study. I guess that's what we call it, because I read all kinds of books. I was interested in doing that, because I didn't have the opportunity to go to college and do all these things. My parents didn't have any money. So then I went and took a test, and they told me that I passed it. And then I done some work at Mississippi Valley State, and I never did get the BS degree. So then in comes this program, and I was selected to out of, I don't know how many, about 400 or 500 people was applying, and but you had to, they had to see what you knew, and so we went through all that, and I ended up at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and so I walked in and told this Mayer, which is Dr. Mayer is the person that teaches all this calculus and just, you know, he was, I said, I don't know nothing about this calculus. Now we just gonna have to sit down and go over this, and he says, well, you about one of the honest students that I ever had. You came in and told me you don't know and you want to learn. So, but I just wanted to get a passing grade, just any way that I could get through with this calculus, and we had to do computer programs to get ready to print out and all that stuff. But anyway, I told him, find me a tutor. I'll take it. So with that kind of help, and with the rest of it, you know, I done fairly well. Didn't have money to get to the colleges because it costs money, you know, and but if you have a thirst for learning, I don't know, I just like knowledge, you know. I don't know, you know, I guess that's what you would call it. I likes to learn, you know, and I just get and that's how I got into all these things I've got into, I guess, because I read and one of the ladies, which was a young woman, at that time she was 10 years younger than me, and she couldn't understand because she had her BS degree, and she said, I can't understand how you know as much as I do, and you haven't got your BS, and how do you understand what you read the well as you do? You know, I mean, some people can read it, but can you comprehend it? What it is that you've read, and you know, how do you decipher it and all that kind of stuff. So that's when I told her. She said, you need to go back to school. You just need to do it. And I stepped in there, you know, at a late age in my life. At 50 years old, going to school.
When did you move back here, or was these experiences living in West Helena and
West Helena
in Memphis? Was that although you're still having to kind of go back and work but either come back here or work in cotton around there? When you moved to Memphis, that's a big city, and do you get a sense of kind of living in a somewhat freer world, or kind of away from the kind of controls of the plantation and the plantation owners? Well,
I think that I was, you know, very, like to classify that I was a young person, young woman, growing up between that and it's like you're in the city, and you know, you just kind of, those are called what I call the lost years. And then that, you know, you're walking around from teenager up until a certain age, and I got married, but I felt that in the city, I just never thought about it. It just was where my family went and lived. And at that time, it wasn't all this stuff in the cities, you know, where that you had to be afraid, or you know, people felt that they wouldn't. Everybody in the city and the rural, I think, was closer together than they thought in terms of economics. In terms of, especially if it was us, the only difference is that if you went to the city, you might find a job. I don't think it was thought out that you're now in a city versus a rural area, you know, to the process where that this was so drastically different. Only thing was, like you stayed in the Elephant Flat, it was better than the shack, you know, that you lived in. There was, like at Booker T. Washington School, there was a lot of activities. You know, there was lights at night, you know, the ball games and stuff. It was right there across. We would see the lights and stuff like that. But I never really thought about it from that standpoint.
So did you go to high school in Memphis, actually?
Well, between, I just went a while there, but it was in Helena and West Helena, Arkansas.
When you got married and then you moved back.
Well, see, I got married and stayed from West Helena, from Helena, Arkansas to here, and that's been it, back and forth. I came down here because my husband's grandmother lived here, and she was all he had because his mother died when he was a boy, and so that's where it's been, you know, between here and there. You follow your husband. So,
How did you feel about moving?
Oh, I didn't want to move down here.
Yeah.
No, I said I'm not going back. That's when I can say that, you know, that it was, I was, you know, having too good a time in a bigger place, you know, I thought. And there I was, 23 something, you know. And so I said, it's funds and things you can go out to and the big stores and all that stuff. And it wasn't anything here. And but I came because my husband was here and I had to come. And then by us being poor and didn't have a lot of resources, and this land is owned by his grandmother, and so he said, well, we'll have places that we own. You know, we had 2 lots in Arkansas that we had gotten because he worked on the boat. So that's what happened. I went out and started paying. I paid $200 for a lot, and he asked me what in the world is I'm doing. I paid $10 a month. I went out trying to buy something, to have something. So I got 1 lot, and the lady said, well, you can get both of them. So I ended up trying to figure out how to scrap up $20 a month to pay on 2 lots, 50 by 100, and about 150, I think it's 150 long now, and 50 feet across. So I got 100 feet across and 150 feet down in a wooded area out there in West Helena, Arkansas, because there's certain areas you could buy and certain areas you couldn't. And that was the first major land buy of the land stuff that I did. That I went out and bought it, and my name was the only thing on it. And I went and found my husband to get him to sign. I was so excited about it, you know, because we was raised up that husband and wives, you know, you didn't do anything without your husband. But I jumped up and went and got this land, and I went to him, and he told me, you hadn't have done that till you asked me. Well, I just had to catch the land, you know, where I was going, and if you don't want it, you know, I was really hurted about it because you couldn't build anything without your husband's signature. And so I went and got him to sign it, that he was part of the owner of the land. So those 2 lots in West Helena, Arkansas was the first thing I've done. I suppose there was outside of not asking my husband. And then we came here, and back and forth. And I can remember his grandmother used to say all the time, you know, she liked to talk to me because she was a very smart woman. She used to teach. And she said, where did you get this woman from? And she said, Jemai? That's what she called him. And he told her, you know, over there now. So, and she said, she's, you know, she may be 20, what you said, but this is a 40-year-old woman. Because she couldn't outsmart me, you know. She would sit and try to come up with deals, tell me, you know, she was gonna keep the money and she would do this for us and so forth and so on. I says, well, that didn't make any sense. You know, I know you will sign the papers to that effect, you know, and stuff like that. And she just couldn't understand. I never thought about it until now, how she used to get behind my back and talk about me. Typical mother-in-law.
So what did you do when you came back here? Did you pretty much stay here? Or?
Yeah, I came down first, and after she died, and we come to. She was sick, and I'd come down to see about her, and then she died. So I've been coming back and forth. I told him that I guess we will have to come and stay on the place because the white people's trying to take it away. First thing, they just thought they could walk in and say to him that Brooksy, a fellow named Brooksy, was supposed to had broke in and took some money or something out of that old house over there. And you know, I told him he don't know that. I said, because you wasn't here, so you cannot, you know, file anything against him. Because they was trying to trap him into filing something against Brooksy, so then that would tie up this land, you know, going through a whole process, because we didn't have no money. And I said, just let him go, you know, because we don't know anything about that. And then they came and said that she owed them some money, and I asked him, my husband would just sit and look at me, you know, because he would say afterwards, you know, I didn't say anything because you was doing all the talking. But he didn't know the questions to ask. And he told me that in later years, you know. I said, well, I want to understand, you know, you say she owe you anything, why don't you give me some papers or something that she signed? Because we wasn't here, so we don't know what happened. But we can take the place now. We can take the place. I said, well, you just proceed to do that. And they sort of backed away, didn't say no more. And but they tried to figure out how to get this lot. They just didn't want, at that time, black folks to have this corner lot, is what they call it, a corner lot. And I came down and stayed in that old house over there. And by 1962, that's when all of this was, we was in and out. So he and I left and went down to Florida, done a little, they said money was growing on trees there, so, you know, could you hold this just a minute? We went down, they told us in Florida the money was growing on trees. And we went down there, and I ended up trying to go to the tomato field. You know, they had the tomatoes, and they say you make a whole lot of money. And I went out there and run up on them big black snakes. Well, that was the end of that. That was my day. I had one day in the field. And so out I came. They told me they wasn't going to hurt you. They was there to get rid of the insect. I said, but I'll hurt myself, you know. So that's what happened with my career of trying to pick tomatoes and make money. Then I ended up trying to figure out how we was going to make some money and live. Is this a problem?
No.
Okay.
No.
If it is, you can just tell him. He understands. One of the things that happened was that he went to pick up stumps, and he run up on rattlesnakes. I mean, you know, they had loads of snakes. They just load them up on them stumps and everything's just on the. But he says, got to be a better way to make a living. But anyway, so I end up in the canning factory. So I went down to the canning plant, and they give you so much a bucket for peeling tomatoes. And so I went in and learned from the ladies, and that's one of the times that I didn't smoke, but I started to smoke. That's when I learned how to smoke. They gave me cigarettes, said that tomatoes wouldn't make you sick. And so I end up smoking Pamel cigarettes. And some of the other folks was dipping snuff. So now I know I couldn't know dip the snuff, but they would chew back and do stuff, and, you know, because of the heat and the fumes and all that. But anyway, so now you're looking at a bona fide tomato peeler. I learned how to peel tomatoes. And but it didn't last. You know, I had to get out of there and come back, and I came back to Mississippi, and that's when they was talking about all the freedom stuff and the fighters, and I says, well, nothing ever happens in Myersville. I had a friend of mine named Corrine. She said the same thing. Nobody's never coming here, you know. And But she and I were sitting on the porch over. The house is tore down now, and it's over there where those new housing development is.
Mm-hmm.
And she and I were sitting on the porch, and we looked up and seen these two guys coming down. And we had heard about that they was in town, and so what happened was that we ended up telling. She telling me, what is them folks? They walking mighty fast, you know, because we know that people walk fast didn't come, you know, from around here. and so they walked on by and they said, hello. And we said, that must be those freedom fighters, you know. They call them freedom riders at that time. And I don't know, you know, it's like, I said to her, you know, I like to talk to them folks, you know, and she said, well, you know, we don't get involved in stuff like that. And so they came to our church, and they came that Sunday. I was teaching Sunday school, and we went from God help those who help themselves, and you know, and that whole thing. And the guy jumped up, and he was from New York, and he said he talked funny because we, you know, at that time we didn't have one TV in the whole town, so didn't anybody know what in the world he was talking about. And he had this accent, and he got up and went through that whole process of whatever he was saying, you know, and he was pointing his finger, and the other guy saw that we did not know what was going on. So he was from Virginia, and he got up, and then he went to talking, and he said, well, you know, you have a right to register and vote, and this kind of type thing, and we are here to talk to people, and could we come back? And they came back for the 11 o'clock service. Now, if this is too much noise, you let us know.
Sorry.
Okay. He came back for the 11 o'clock service and talked to our pastor. And our pastor said, well, they're doing that in Louisiana. And this deacon stood up, Johnny Bonds, and said, well, you know, we ain't gonna fool with nothing like that, you know. And I sit there and perked up, and what's wrong with the pastor said it's okay, you know. I'm thinking, well, now this guy, what is he talking about? And the next thing, they went on and talked about that, and the church voted that we could have the meeting. And Johnny Bonds come back to the night service, 6 o'clock, and stood up and told us that Mr. Donnell, which was the sheriff at that time, said that do not have no meeting like that in the church. I said, what'd you say? Right out in church, you know. Women wasn't supposed to do much talking in church. And he said, well, you're not supposed to have. I said, well, okay. And so I come from that meeting, sitting thinking, now I'm going to call the sheriff and asked him what happened. And that's what I did. I called the sheriff the next day, and I said to him, what we need to do is to find out, you know, Mr. Donnell, what is your situation on this church? And he said, what are you talking about? But he didn't like me no way, you know, because I'm having something to do with these freedom fighters that at our church. And he said, who said that? I said, Johnny Bond said that you said that we could not have this meeting in our church. And I thought that God was the head of our church. I didn't know you was. I'm coming and arrest you. I'm putting y'all in jail for libel. I'm going to put you in jail. And he was so upset. But anyway, Johnny Bonds was chastised, I guess, by him. And we had the meeting. And that's when I decided that I was going to go to that meeting, my husband and I. And he said, well, you just wait, I'm getting ready. I was in a hurry to try to get to church. And I got there that night, and we stood up there, and the man got up and explained to us, if you registered to vote, such and such a thing. Well, I hadn't read all that, by going to school, and that was supposed to have been for white people. The voting and everything else wasn't for us, it was for white people. And it's your constitutional rights and this and so on. And who would go? And I jumped up. And my husband was sitting down. He said, sit down. You sit down until I stand up. And then he stood up. And then I stood up. And I guess I've been standing up ever since, But it was getting involved,
yeah,
from a standpoint of listening to what they were saying, that we had a right as people in America to register to vote, which we was denied that.
Did you have a sense of, even in the years before that, the kind of emergence of the civil rights movement in the South? I mean, did you know or kind of follow or think much about, say, the Montgomery bus boycott or the sit-ins in Greensboro, or the kinds of things that were starting to happen? Do you think that influenced, or people started beginning to feel a part of something?
I think that one of the things is, I've said, I was raised up where that was white town and that was black town in West Allen, Arkansas, where you couldn't go to White Town only to pick up mail or something like that, because that's where the post office was, or you go down there to do what you're supposed to do and come on back, across the railroad track. So I always felt something was definitely wrong with this, and I didn't know what it was. Then I used to worry about, why was I born black? If God loved me, like He's supposed to, and things that we were taught in the church, why is we so mistreated, and what happened? Then when this come along, it's like putting it all together, that you're doing something right, that this is decent, and then the first thing came was the Freedom Riders, and that's really they call it the Freedom Ride, because the first group of people that came, they came from all over the country. They got on the buses and came to Mississippi, and they put them in jail in Parchment, and we heard about this was black and white sitting on the buses together, and so you feel that you hear about it and that kind of stuff, but at the time, I guess that when somebody come along and go to talking to you, and I'm already feeling deep inside of me, from the time I was a child, clean up until now, that my father said it wasn't right, my uncle said it wasn't right, my grandmothers and all of them said it wasn't right, and here's a time for me to make it right. I guess that's some of the ways that some people caught on to it. For me, it's just, I had a saying that I started, nothing from nothing leaves nothing. We didn't have nothing. So if anything happened to us, we didn't have nothing in the first place. So that I'd say that to people, and they caught it. It was kind of corny, but nothing from nothing leave nothing, and let's us get up and try to get something. And people understood it from a standpoint, because we didn't have anything. It wasn't sometimes just rights we were talking about. We didn't have decent houses to stay in. We didn't have food, we didn't have the basic needs that people right around us had, which was the white people that we worked for, that we made them a living, and we knew that they could pay a little bit more or something, was the situation. And so when all that come about, I was ready to be a part of this movement.
You've been preparing in some little ways all your life.
All my life. I think that I can feel that from the time, as Annie used to say it, and my grandmother, because she was one of these people that registered to vote when folks wasn't registered to vote in Arkansas. and she was an older woman. And when the drive come, she explained it to my mother. She said, you Z right. And I'm, some of my family was afraid of me because they didn't want you to come around because the white folks would kill them or shoot them and stuff like that. But I could always go to my grandmother, and sit down and talk about this. So it's that kind of a preparation, because Mama would say, she was. They have these conversations on how they outsmarted the white people in certain areas, such as how did she learn how to read and write, and from that, this one would say, we're going to make sure that this happened. If we do that, he's not going to pay attention. All these fullers hate, so he's not going to pay attention. That kind of a situation. So now here's the time for me to try to make sure that my son don't. It was embedded in me from my mother that he don't go to these schools. This still was going on. That they could pull you out of school, and you in even up to 1964. 65 lawsuit was when we filed a lawsuit around. We didn't have books, and the children would go 3 months out of the year, to school.
And that was still happening even then.
Still happening from the time that I was a child, clean up until my son. And here we are in the same. Nothing drastically changed in the rural areas and in the black community only in the last 25 years. Everything was the same, the repeat. And that's the reason why that my mother and I could sit down and talk about the same identical thing, because nothing happened different. Everything started to happening from young people, say around about 35 or 40 years old, on back down. But other than that, all of us can talk about the same thing. So nothing changed. The way that you did business, the way that we was pushed to do. But we have never been comfortable with the way we were treated. Some people used to say that we were happy, See, the smiling and the grinning and all that was just to get over, to make sure that you made it, And I think we still got that problem in America right now. People don't know what is the real movement, and then when they see the explosive things happen, they think that, everything seems to be going along pretty good and ain't nobody voting. They should have changed people. They should have done this and they should have done that. But see, they don't have hundreds of years. We got people registered, but people hadn't. When is people been voted?
Right.
People didn't know nothing about going voting. So after we got the folks registered, we still had a problem. If white people took the votes, the very votes that we done registered to people, and turned it for themselves. Now we've been through that. But I've been involved in a small way even before I got deeply involved in 1964.
Very fundamental one. I'm curious too, back to the church, where I think you mentioned that women in the church weren't supposed to stand and speak out, and that you kind of left up, your husband sort of saying, "Wait, until I can stand up." I mean, it must have been extra hard for a woman at that point in time to stand up.
Well, women. I guess, when we talk about the women's movement, first thing, we wasn't even allowed to vote. Of course, you know that. But it was passed down that you wasn't feminine if you spoke out before your husband, or you wasn't an obedient wife, and you wasn't. You wanted to be accepted in your community a certain kind of way, so you didn't do certain things as a woman. That's from that standpoint. The other way was that men did not allow it, and my husband used to say to me, you just got the food and hand it to somebody, didn't even ask me, you know. You couldn't take food out of the house, you know, like somebody come and say, could I borrow some salt or some whatever? And I just said, wait just a minute, and I just go get it, you know. And he, when I get finished, he says, you know, I'm good to you. And I said, what? He said, you do whatever you want, you know. You get up, and I never thought that you're not supposed to do that. See, I didn't know that you wasn't supposed, you're supposed to ask your husband, could you give somebody some salt or some sugar or something like that. And then when it's time to speak out or say anything on issues, you didn't say it. You know, they went by what was said in the Bible that the women are supposed to be silent in the church. And, you know, I found myself being rebellious or defiled against when you speak out or say something, you know. But my husband wasn't mean or nasty about it. He just would tell me about it or correct me, you know. Just like when I jumped up and said, I'll go, you know, to the courthouse to try to register to vote. And he said, sit down till I stand up. It wasn't that he wasn't going to do it, because he was not afraid to do it. But he just, you know, I'm just one of these people. Immediately, you know, I hit the floor. And then he stood up, and then I stood up. Then the same way when we had problems with the telephone, you know, people got to the place they call when we finally got a telephone, because that's a long story within itself, because we had to sue to get telephones in this area. A lawsuit had been in. It took about 10 years. They didn't want black people to have phones. It cut off all kinds of communication. All the communication was supposed to come through white people, you know, so that they would, you know, it's the whole slavery mentality of keeping up with what the natives are doing. But we, when they would call here, they would say, Jerry, let me speak to Unita. And he didn't understand that, because if somebody called, they were supposed to talk to him. Then he would make the decision whether I talked to him or not. And he got to the place he kept saying, well, these people just ignoring me, you know. And we talking about voting, you know, getting folks out and what happened to such and such. Let me speak to Unita. Some such thing that happened, you know, somebody's house on fire, they done did this and so forth. And he said, tell me about it. I'll tell her, you know, or whatever. But it was cutting into, you know, the traditional way of that whole thing. And it's just like this house that I live in, you know, is whatever come up. I said I wanted to get up and get a house, and he says, well, I don't think we need one. And I said, the one we're in is falling down. So I sued Farmers Home Administration, you know, and because they wouldn't give you a house, they wouldn't even let us have houses. But see, I could not even sign for the house. You had to have a husband. And that was one of the things that I worked on, making sure that women could have their own credit cards and sign for houses and buy houses when I served on the President Carter's advisory committee. That was one of my recommendations. We've been through a lot, you know, of saying to Congress, you know, that this don't make no sense. Why can't a woman sign to buy a house? The women in 1968 could not sign for the house.
What was the registration, the effort here? Did you end up trying to register to vote here?
I became a SNCC.
So these were SNCC workers who came?
Yes. I became a SNCC worker, and Fannie Lou Hamer, I had to go over, and they had to take me over to see Miss Hamer. And Stokely said, I want you to meet a woman. You and her is similar. And he says, you all speak up, and your spirits is something. And I went to see Miss Hamer, and she told me about how they had beat her. And Um, she told it. We knew about it, you know, but she told it how they beat her till she was hard, and I was very angry, you know, and she saw it, and she said, you know, we got to keep that and channel it in the right direction.
Mm.
We can't hate white people the way they've hated us.
Mm-hmm.
God is calling for us to love them. He's calling for us to love them enough to remove them from office,
Mm-hmm.
to send them home because they're sick.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't treat sick people that way. Keep them up and sitting them in offices when they're not supposed to be there. Miss Hamer had a sense of humor. This was absolutely wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And she made me understand that that I had to get that kind of love that would get me up above turning into the same thing that I had been a part of for so
Mm-hmm.
long, and that hate and all that. And I went after a way of life that would make me productive,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And she and I used to go there and stay, and she and Pap, and it was wonderful
Mm-hmm.
lessons on her thoughts and what she thought about life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we did one another. People like Annie Devine and Victoria Gray and these women. Victoria Gray now is Victoria Gray Adams. She married Adams fellow. We was part of the formation of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that Miss Hamer, when they put Lawrence Guillot, because he was our chair, they put him in jail. We was getting ready to go to Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And Miss Hamer said, we're going on anyway. And that was different because women did not, you know, move into all these roles, and that's the first time I ever seen these many women doing different things of this sort.
Mm-hmm.
Vicky, that's what we call her. Vicky was standing, you know, and talking and reading off stuff, and Miss Devine, she was so strong and precise, you know, and they always say that I was the organizer,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and making sure that they do what they were supposed to do. And as I look back, you know, I was younger than them, but they said I was more demanding. And I never forget, we went to 1965, we went to challenge the seating of the Democratic senators and
Mm-hmm.
representatives in Washington, D.C. And they said they didn't want to go on the floor. You know, they was inside of the Congress building, and the Black Caucus, the one who was there at that time, Diggs and some of the rest of them had told them to come on down on the floor. And they said, no, we'll just sit here and look. I said, no, you won't. You going to the floor. Because that was history. Because that's the first time that any black woman had ever put their feet on the floor of Congress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was really amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Victoria and Miss Devine is still living, so they talks about that, you know. You need to made us go, you know. Made us go down there. But it's those kind of things you don't think is be making history at the time. You're just part of doing what you feel that you have to do. And so voter registration to me was just a need, you know, something that we felt that had to be done.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel it must have been really also an incredibly energizing and exciting to have these few people come in, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're part of a movement or part of a group of people that are challenging things. And
you know, to be a part of something. I think this was on the road to my own self-development or whatever, or enlightened as a young woman, that I finally found a bunch of people that felt like I did, you know, that it's been buried down inside of me, and then they was gonna do something about it. You know, we's gonna do something, and the whole thing is sometimes you didn't know whether you was gonna live or die. That was every day, you know. You didn't know whether you was gonna live or die, but but you don't know. Let me put it this way: you don't know whether you're gonna live or die, but you know that if you die, you done lived. You really is living. You know, you really is trying to do something to help yourself and your grandchildren, children, you know, and you just and that's how we sell it. You know, we go out and says, you know, and they could see it in you. You know, is to be an organizer, you got to believe in what you do and be a part of it. And so the people would say, well, I'm not like you, I'm scared, you know, and I say, I am too. You know, but we can make it. You know, we're gonna be scared whether we do this or whether we don't. You know, because we drive down the road, or sometime, you know, we walk and walk up in people's houses, and they were scared to death. You know, they just didn't want you in there, and you had to convince them. It wasn't that we was open arm received. You know, and sometimes we just had to coax them along and say, you know, we understand you're scared. We know the man may throw you off the place, and a lot of times they did. And I end up with American Friends Services and a whole lot of other organizations, and you found all kinds of resources of people were thrown off the plantation. Could we get a piece of land? And we did that, and got some houses for people to stay in, and we drug in things and built things, and it wasn't just registered people. Everything had to happen because nothing had happened.
Right.
And when they throw people off, then what you gonna do? Then people didn't have no jobs. They was working for the man, probably. Sure, I was picking cotton, and the rest of us tried to go out there and do something. But I was barred from doing anything. I couldn't teach school. I couldn't do anything because they had people here that hadn't went in from the 8th grade, but they was teaching school. You know, but they wouldn't let people like me do anything. So in 1964 is the last job, quote, that they would let me do, you know, because of my involvement in the whole civil rights movement. And that last job was chopping cotton and picking. Because they had nailed it down to that. They said she talks too strong to be in the school system or wherever, you know. So that's the kind of intense situation that we was in, constant. We wasn't only just saying, come on, let's go register to vote, but we had to find a place for people to eat, what's going to happen to them if they put off the plantation, what's going to happen when my child gets shot. A woman got shot, you know, shot child's eye out over in Shockett County, and, you know, then we have to take up that. When people get in jail, how we're going to get them out. So it was an intense work all the time. But it just is, and we became closer than a family, you know, because all of us was like family. And I'm not talking about one of them wayward families. I'm talking about those families that really, really care about, you know, what's happening with one another. And now, you know, 25, 30 years later, you know, where we see one another or hear about one another, you know, it's the same thing. Because we know we all been through it. And our people are doing different things, you know. It was so funny, I had the mayors from China here I was in Washington. We had left New York and went over to Washington, and the mayor and the governors from China, and I said, I'd like for you to meet John Lewis. John was walking because the Black Caucus weekend was in Washington, D.C., the weekend of the 24th, 26th, 27th, and all that. And John stopped. He saw me. Hey, how you doing, man? You know. But you couldn't just stop the congressman, you know, if you wasn't who you were, you know, just stop. And he just stopped and come right around and hugged me and shook all of them hand, you know, and everything. Because it's not his constituents, it's not anything. I'm not even his constituency. But he was head of SNCC, you know, and we was all there as a body. And it's that kind of a thing that you see, you know, and I was at Harvard last year, and that was Julian Bond, you know, and folks can't even get to Julian Bond, you know, he's popular, you know, and I call up and say, I'm here, I'll be right over, you know, come running over there, and he came to my class, and the folks are just in awe, you know, and he's standing there and hope me sung freedom songs, you know. The great Julian Bond. Yeah.
We just had a class that we used a book about Freedom Summer. It's a book by Doug McAdams, a sociologist, and kind of looking at all the student he's looking at the student volunteers primarily. But what was that? I mean, that must have been a very intense and also interesting experience in Mississippi, and you were working with all this. What was that? I'm just curious what that was like, or how you saw that whole strategy.
Well, how I saw it, because I was 28, 29 years old and so on. Here were students that was from, say, 18, 19, 20 on, you know. Some was in college, some was in universities and so on. And there it was, you know, their life on the line with us, black and white. And they came to Freedom Summer. And landed in Mississippi. The painful thing was when 2 whites and 1 black got killed. It meant something. I don't know how to express it yet, and maybe I'm still searching. It meant something that people had been dying. We know that for years, but here was people dying for my right that I know in my time to try to register to vote. And students came here to live in my old house over there. Miriam Tillinghast, a black young woman, come to teach. And my concept of teaching at that time was like at the schools, you know. But she was teaching about who was the people that had been involved in fighting for our rights. Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, and she went back and just got people, you know, and we would sit and learn about all these people that wasn't taught in our schools. I knew about Booker T. Washington, John Washington Carver, you know, and all that, but it never was any people like these people that, and it was those many people, and then they brought up books with us, with our images, you know, and things like that. So we went to school to learn who we were, you know, and it came from these students, young people that I was young, but they were younger, and it's just, you know, it was such an inspiration that they didn't have to be here. You know, that Freedom Summer was really something, because they didn't have to be here. And we end up filing all kinds of suits and doing all kinds of things, and end up that with freedom schools, and everything came out of it, you know, and people came from all over and taught in our freedom schools, and my son and a whole lot of other people's children was exposed that they had some intellect that then nobody knew about, you know, intelligence and things, and they'd done tests, and he was classified as what they call them, extra gifted or whatever they call these children. That kind of something happened because of Freedom Summer for me. And I think it's the lasting thing inside of me that made me continue. You know, because there was so many came from everywhere. People came from everywhere.
Did you have a freedom school here in Myersville?
Yes.
Scrawny.
Down at Rose Hill Church.
Is that right?
See, we didn't have no other buildings.
Yeah. Right.
See, the only buildings we had to have these classes in about who we were and what is it all about. I used my house. Toby Height was one of the men around here. Mr. Henry Size, he was an NAACP person. Because at that time, NAACP was truly radical, you know. That's what they call it, you know, because you belong to
Communist Front.
yeah, everything, you know. I mean, it was terrible, and I come to find out white people was in it. I didn't even know, you know. But we had so much misinformation, I tell you.
Yeah, that's true.
But it was that summer, you know, the challenge of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and there I was, didn't know that. I had never organized a party or an organization or whatever. We organized a party and organizations and freedom schools and anything that you can think of, ways of trying to survive. We had to create it, and we had to come up with it. And I guess that was the leap, I guess I can say, into that I felt that I could do other things, you know, that I didn't know that I was a creative person, you know, and out of that, seeing these other people around me, which I choose to call creative people, out of that, you know, I saw that I could do and continue. And then I formed the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. I'm a part of that, you know, that something as great as that was in terms of this political system. And then, well, why couldn't I form Mississippi Action for Community Education, which is MACE? You know, started that because that one day we was talking, you know, it's 5 or 6 of us sitting around, and said, what is we going to do? You know, because the Freedom Summer was over, people were going home, all these things was changing. We got to sustain what we did look at. The 5 of us were sitting there. And I kept saying, we have to have leadership in the local community, because when people go home, who's going to do it? You know, we have to continue to register people. We have to be able to continue to make people feel that they can do something in their own community. And I felt that that was the job of MACE, is to train. That's what we started off to do, to train local people to know what to do in their own communities. And that was, the idea was, in my head, was to make sure that people know what was a board of supervisor, what do they do, what do mayors do, what, because we didn't even know what they did. What do the justices of peace do? What do, you know, all these things came up and had us running for these offices. But we were the only one knew, because that they told us to run, in '67, I ran for Justice of the Peace. Then I come to find out that Justice of the Peace was over so much other stuff, you know. So how could we continue this learning process at the local level? And we said if we get 5 people, you know, in a county to know what's going on, then we have touched the lives of so many other people, because they can call people and, you know, have meetings and talk to folks and that kind of thing. So we had targets, 10 in certain kinds of counties with the population. If 10 people knew what was happening, what was going on, when the election comes up, what do that mean, that kind of type thing. That's the reason why the MACE was put together, for because we was left, people were leaving during the Freedom Summers, the Freedom School era, and so on and so on. Then we had to come up with a way to continue local leadership development, because I knew I was left here. Other people were left in their community to either do or die, you know, or either go back to wherever we were, which was nothing. And then Ed Brown agreed, because he was SNCC too, and we made him the head of MACE as the project director. And he was doing it until we had all these problems with rap. You know, things was going on with him, which was his brother, and Steptoe got killed, and you know, a whole lot of stuff was happening. And then we tried to figure out, because I have it here, the first application that I made to trying to get some money to, you know, get us started. So a lot of people don't know how MACE started.
I didn't know that story, and I've read a lot about MACE.
And that's the reason I want a copy of my tape, because I never told anybody. The reason for that is because that I was going to write it, and I intended to write it, you know, what the whole detail, who all was there, each person, and what they was about.
Well, that'd be interesting.
And Amzie Moore was one of the people that was there. Vandy Lou Hamo. So we got a couple of 3, 4 more. I'm going to give you the whole thing. But anyway, that's what this was all about. Is trying to find ways to continue. And we started off, a Citizen Crusade for Poverty was one of the groups that was going to help us. See, I was testifying, I went up to testify for the Citizen Crusade for Poverty, sort of had organized this, about what is we going to do about Head Start. Because we was trying to get Head Start off the ground and CDGM. And so I'm one of the organizers of CDGM.
Could you tell us about that, how that got started? And some of the...
Well, it started off with the doctor, you know, that started pushing it. He was from New York. And it was a concept to just say we're going to have a 6-week program. It came behind, you know, all of the problems of seeing the children in Mississippi, that what is we going to do about our children? And our children so far behind, and we couldn't, you know, we couldn't feed them right, and the teeth was messed up, and a whole lot of other stuff. So we found out about OEO. Well, OEO is that, so a lot of things happened between then, because I was at the meeting when President Johnson, you know, said, you know, to fulfill these rights and that whole thing, you know, that we had a meeting at the White House as SNCC people and some of the rest of us when he announced the war on poverty. And so out of that was the money that was coming out of OEO to do these kinds of projects and programs. And so that's how it sort of started off with a friend of mine, which I'll talk about him. So because that he was hooked to the church and school, then we had Mary Home Junior College.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it was supposed to come through.
Mm-hmm.
But the state of Mississippi was supposed to sign off.
Right.
Well, they wouldn't, you know that.
Right.
So then Mary Home Junior College became the grantee
Mm-hmm.
agency from
Mhm.
OEO. And we had a first program was 6 weeks. And that's when I met my good friend for all these years, which Dr. Josephine Martin and Dr. Robert Swartz. They came down. He's a PhD
Mhm.
from economics, and so he and her came.
Mm-hmm.
And she was to test the children, because they said all our children was retarded,
Mhm.
and it wasn't any use to have such a program,
Mhm.
you know. And the governor and all of them said that, you know, the children was okay because that their stomachs was sticking out and fat and they were shiny. That statement is actually made.
Yeah.
And that was because of malnutrition, you know,
Mhm.
that the stomach was swollen and that kind of type of thing. So that's when we started the first 6-week program of OEO. Then we had a lot of transition conflicts between the movement people versus federal government.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we know if we dealing with the government's money, that we was going to have a problem of people getting co-opted, and what was that going to do, and that kind of type thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to make a decision. So the next year, I became fussed, and one time we went up there and they told me they don't even want to hear the word CDG. Washington was so tired of us. They was
Four-word
tired of
word.
seeing us. And so that's how I went to argue about, they brought in the community action programs.
Yeah.
See, they set up, all this was going on at the same time. There's so many things happening.
Yeah. No, that's right.
Doing that, you know, war on poverty announcement, and then the money came, and then everybody's going to get in on the money to cut the money off. So they set up community action programs. Who was sitting on the committees was those same people, the plantation owners and all them other folks that had kept us without anything. And then they said they was going to have maximum feasible participation of the poor.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my question to Sergeant Shriver. And so I end up on the front page of the Times with my finger, asked him with my finger pointing at Sergeant Shriver, what is maximum feasible participation of the poor? And he had just come from Arkansas, saying that, you know, talking about hamburgers, and they had put him up to like a hamburger, somebody was something, you know, and I told him I'm not interested in that. All I want to know is what is maximum feasible participation of the poor. So they caught that finger, and that's when it scared me to death, because they come to find out the man was a powerful man. You know, I didn't know one bunch of powerful people from the other one. You know, I mean, it didn't matter to us. My concern was that I didn't know who he was. It wasn't important. They told me he was the one that I was supposed to ask, because he was heading up, you know, this situation, and that's what I did. I didn't know he was tied to the Kennedys and all them other big folks, you know, nothing else. It was really funny. But that man stood there and looked at me and called his aides and things to come out to give me an explanation, you know what I mean? Because he, you know, it hit him.
Yeah.
It just tell me, what is the maximum feasible? You know, what do that mean? And for us, you know, we don't understand that.
Yeah.
You go to Mississippi and tell these people what is maximum feasible participation of the poor. And what it meant was they would handpick one person, black, and sit them there, one that the plantation owner was in control of. And that's what we was fighting, you know, trying to say, give us the amount, and what do that mean? And that's when I met, and we got to be good friends. As the Crusade for Poverty People, and everybody was around.
You said that you were afraid when you first got the money for CDGM, or when you were in the process of conceptualizing it and developing the program, that you didn't want a situation where people got co-opted and just, you know, kind of professional. You were going out trying to organize communities so that they would take control of the programs and the projects for themselves.
No, see, what happened was we were caught in a situation where that we go through all these teachings. Our teachings was that when people get the money, who is in control of the money? Who tells that person what to do? Well, with guidelines and all these other kinds of things, there's so much you could do. Then that cut the folks off from getting registered. If they did, they was kind of halfway afraid to vote because they didn't want, because they come out of a mentality of white people saying you can't go down there. If you do, I won't let you have my job, and I won't let you. And so that's kind of the crossfire that we were in, and that was saying, look, this is the government. You are part of that government. This is the money. We will follow the guidelines. But that doesn't mean that you don't go and register to vote, or register people to vote, or you vote yourself when the time comes. So that's where where the fear was, because a lot of people jump in just to survive and wouldn't go register. They would not go register because they didn't want to rock the boat. You know, of this as I'm going to lose my job or what's going to happen. And so this had to be taught. I end up part of a training team, systematic problem solving techniques, to train heads of that's the next year. We're coming in now with other stuff. So I went up to Cambridge, and we was taught by a German professor on systematic problem solving techniques, so that people could go to understanding that how to solve problems. What they saw as the problem was the problem. We done onion peel, you know, the whole thing. But we was chosen because they gave us a test and all that. So I've been through that test to see who would go to be trainers. And so I came back, and we trained over 700 people throughout the Head Start programs, for people to realize that they can take what they had and build rooms and, you know, and all kinds of stuff, and maybe it's to build their self-esteem more than anything else. That they too we could have these Head Start programs in this little crony over here in this little church, and all we needed was 2 bathrooms, and we needed this and so on, and we don't have no money, so what is the real problem? You know, where somebody say, well, the problem is money. Oh yeah, we know that. So okay, let's see what the real problem is. Let's go back. Do we have people who is interested that want to build something, or could you find somebody in the community? You know, and that kind of opening up. So I've been a systematic problem solving technique. So you're looking at a systematic problem solving technique. But we've been through that kind of organizing techniques. Anything necessary to get down to break through this hundreds of years of teaching and programming people, which is the African American now, that you can't do, or you're not allowed to do, or you're not educated enough to do. And we had to break through all of that, and still that process needs to happen. That it's and they would say, well, we're just trying to get by, you know what I mean? Because all you do is try to live any way you possibly could. And so most of us that was in these kinds of roles was classified as leaders, you know. But we also was in that same trap of trying to break out. That's the reason why I went back to try to get a degree, so people could see, you know, that it's important when you stand before young people and say, you know, I want you to go to school. My mother was important to tell me that and push me to do that. But also I can move a little further. I could tell my son, look, I went back to school and I got this. And because I didn't have a chance, you don't have to do that. You go straight through, you know, and that kind of type thing. It's a process that I feel that is very needed in terms of education within the black community that we was trying to do. And that process, we wasn't just educating children by going to school, we was educating the whole community, the mothers, the fathers, the aunts and the uncles and everybody, that you too can become a part of the United States citizenship. And that is hard work. That's hard work. Because it's tied to every piece of being of saying divide and conquer. You know, like if the white man that owned it, he became on the board of the Community Action Program. He became the one that this very one that told them they couldn't go down to the polls and register to vote. He became on the Community Action Program. So I had to go to Washington, you know, to say to this fella, look, you done set up a must out here. You know, because what do you mean by maximum feasible participation of the poor? Do we have any strength on these boards that you finna send all this money down through, quote, to get Head Starts and all these other kinds of programs out to the community? And so that's when we was holding on to CDGM. That was a fight between the community action programs. They wanted to set that up as an entity, government entity. Then here's a group over here that was doing what it was doing. So now we have the Friends of Children in the state of Mississippi and other kinds of Head Start programs. But they had to change the names because they said they was tired of looking at us strolling in and out of there. Named CDGM, you know. So that's how, you know, the organizing techniques of all of this in the 60s, you know, we were so busy with so many things in every piece. Now we organized, that's the time when they come and remove me, the President Johnson had to call out the National Guards to move us off the Greenville Air Force Base. We took over the Greenville Air Force Base.
What was that? What was that story about?
But see, we're saying when we talk about organizing, there was people who was working on the farms from sun to sun, the sun up, sun down, wasn't making, the tractor drivers was making $5 a day. People were working for $3 a day. And then we talked about organizing a union. So we organized the union. And the union was to, you know, say that we wasn't going to work. It's the farmers union. And it's amazing all that stuff that happened. But anyway, we organized the union. And, well, the farmers didn't like it at all, quite naturally, you know that. And so, but see, the forces we had against us was the farmers. They was upset. The law enforcement, they was with the farmers. So you didn't get anything done that was for you, that was right. You know, that you was soon to get arrested for standing up saying you wasn't going to work or wasn't going to drive these tractors or whatever. And so then they're going to cut off the commodities. They wasn't going to give them the commodities. And if you was a good black person, what they meant by that was that you didn't raise no sand or nothing, then you got some butter and some meal and some flour, and that was the basic. They didn't have about 5 or 6 things. So you got that. So they would always try to elevate somebody like that so that that person could say to the others, look what I got, you know, that I'm feeding my family.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened, we sit in Edwards, Mississippi, the Delta Ministry, because I served on the Delta Ministry board,
Mm-hmm.
and SNCC people, Corps people, NAACP people, sitting around down there. And I and Owen Brooks, a few other people now, were down there. And we came up with, where is some federal land to demonstrate to the United States government that we need to have housing, food,
Mm-hmm.
and just purely care, you know, for the people in Mississippi. Well, they thought about the coast. That wasn't working. So we came up with Greenville. And Greenville used to be an Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
And we said that have to be government land. But we didn't know which one that the Greenville had took over, how much of that land, and which was left as still belongs to the government. But we all got in cars, come on up to a church, and we had a meeting that evening at the church in Greenville. And we got this guy off in a corner. There's always a core in organizing. There's the people who know everything.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's another group that knows another level. Then there's another level that knows exactly what's going to happen
Mm-hmm.
at the strategic points, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody went out there and says, we can't get in that place. We had them to go and case the place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we said, tell you what you do. Go take the lock off. One of the buildings, because our people will turn around if it's a lot of, you know, they won't act right.
Mm-hmm.
They will get upset if the door is not open. So we got the guy to go there and pick the lock that just left it hanging in there. And that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
The next morning we got in car number 1, van number 2. I was in van number 2 because van number 2 is to go in,
Mm-hmm.
to take over. The first van is to decoy. The car went on and the man waved, and it was full of people. He waved at him. I reckon he said, where's all these people going this morning? Black folks. Some of them, we had 2 or 3 whites in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the second one, and we went in. And when he said, hey, you're going the wrong way. We thought we was going down there to catch the plane. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And we said, yes, so that building was inside of that fence. So we went inside. They used to have a place in Greenville where they had a guard sitting there when you
Mhm.
go to the base. And all he do is just wave you on, you know, because he used to ask, where you going? So with so many of us, the first one, he waved and they told him he was going inside. He said, oh, okay. And then he saw the other one. He waved at us. And then and we turned and went to that building.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to screaming, you're going the wrong way, going the wrong way. And we kept, and the others took off behind us. And we went in. And I hit the door. You know how I know it was open.
Mm-hmm.
And we went in. And they said we took over the Greenville Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
About 2 hours later, there was everywhere. ABC was there, NBC was there, and CBS, because that's all they had at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then here comes the man, head of the Justice Department, because he had been down here talking to me several times. He said, why didn't you tell me that y'all was going to do that? I said, we had told y'all we was going to do it. It wouldn't have been the need to do it, you know. And in comes people. The word went out all over the state. Whenever they stick a microphone before me, why did you take over the Greenville Air Force Base? We need this and so forth and so on. And I was standing there in a fur coat, that one of them boxes that they had done sent, you know, I was telling people was raggedy and they didn't have nothing, but I was in a fur coat, you know, and somebody called me afterwards and said, you need, I tell you, that wasn't a good image. You standing there in a fur coat talking about folks didn't have no clothes. But, and I'd say people come. And I stood up that night and told them stories about me in the White House, and we knocked out a glass and run a pipe out and set up house on the Greenville Air Force Base. And we stayed there till the troops came in 3 days or 4 days later. And then I and several of us, I'm in the book called Black Protest. But anyway, they kept saying to us, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I just stood up and went to talking. You know, you have to keep people believing in whatever they're doing. And I says, you know, I went to the White House. They say, you did? And then I went on and told them I was in the White House, and I was walking around in the White House, and they had liquor in the White House. I said, you know, they don't lie in Mississippi. You know, we you know, this is a dry state. I said, Johnson has got liquor in the White House. You just pass around. And I told them the story, you know, that I went in there and they just had this big old bottle, and I asked the man, I said, could I get this? I want to take this back to Mississippi and show that it is whiskey in the White House. And I know if it's whiskey in the White House, the state of Mississippi don't have to be dry. I think 2 or 3 years later it wasn't. That was another move we did. This is so many things. But it's those was the days when we'd done so many things, because behind the takeover of the Greenville Air Force Base, and they physically come to get us, it was nothing but white troops. And I was on TV screaming, here come the white people again. You know, it's not a black one to come to remove us. Did you know they had to stop and fly them some black folks? So it took another day for them to find them some black National Guards to fly in. So then that's what they, you know, were focused. That's the truth. And then we marched. When they literally, he said, ma'am, I don't mean no harm. I'm going to carry you. So they carried us. They pick us up and carry us because we weren't going to get off. And then when we finally, they got all us outside of the Greenville Air Force Base, we started marching. And we marched clean on to a place called Freedom Village. A white fellow sold us the land through all this process that was going on. He had to leave town, though. And we got the Delta Ministry, the National Council of Churches, and all to buy the land. And that's where we started Freedom Village.
This is the tent city that you said.
Then out of that came building of the houses out there. We built some houses for the farmers. The farmers didn't, you know, the people had been thrown off to places and all that kind of stuff. Out of that process, the people like Thelma Barnes, you can talk to her about this, be good. Jake Harris is dead. People, they, you know, we all was doing this, was working with the land and trying to find places for people to stay, because they was thrown out of Bolivar County, Issaquah County, Shark County. People just put off places because of the union, you know, the farmers' unions that we had formed. And out of that, MACE, you know, was still, I'm over here on this side, we're working on this piece, got MACE going. Then here was a need further on. Charles Bannerman, I went and got him. And so I'm the person that hired Charles Bannerman to come down. And then from that to, he asked me what did I think about having, we started the Blues Festival
Mm-hmm.
Out on the Freedom.
Oh, was
Village.
that where that's where that
Yes.
takes place? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
They don't publicize that.
No. See, that's where.
They don't. That's not part of the story anymore. that
Well,
they
the
tell.
story. Let me tell you that we, you know, the blues festival come out of my head
Mm-hmm.
and 2 or 3 other folks that wasn't. They just said that the affiliates. We was trying to set up what we call the affiliates,
Mm-hmm.
and the question came up. Well, you guess we could get them to help us, you know,
Mhm.
because you got to get other people to come and say that they would serve and be part of it and that kind of type thing. And Charles Bama said, well, "What you think about it?" You know, and I said, "Well, let's try it."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we had our first blues festival, and what that was to help the people that was out there on that Freedom Village
Mhm.
in those houses.
Mm-hmm.
It was to help them.
Mhm.
They was trying to get a water system and all this stuff out there, and it was a
Mhm.
way to raise the money
Mm-hmm.
to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we had several out there, so that's how it started.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's grew into all this monstrous situation
Right.
with everybody.
They don't tell that story for the national press.
I just want you to know that's where
Yeah,
it comes
well, that's
from.
good.
They
That's
do not own the founding of it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the founding of it would come from just
Mm-hmm.
some of us
Yeah.
organizing.
How did you, what I'm trying to kind of piece things together until you start working here in Myersville again to get this city incorporated, because that's
Mhm.
another
Peace.
piece of the story. And maybe we could just spend a little bit more time on the 60s and how you felt. I mean, you had four or 5 years of just very intense activity. You know, I mean, I can imagine what your life must have been like, just, you know, running around here day after day after day. And you're talking about these different organizations that
Mhm.
you're actively participating in. As some of the energy of the civil rights movement began to move north and be taken away by the anti-war movement or the kinds of concerns about that, what kinds of things did you do and did other people in Mississippi do to kind of keep pushing on the kinds of issues that you'd been raising? Or did that was there a change there?
Well, we kept. You have that period of that is not dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, myself, I moved into housing because I had took that step of pushing from voter registration over to development of CDGM. So now, what is the other people needs are housing.
Mm-hmm.
So my whole thing was, if you get them registered, you know, they ain't got no house to stay in, and they don't have these basic kind of things. Their children don't have dental care and a whole lot of other things. So that was the thinking
Mhm.
process in my mind, and some of the rest of the people, I'm sure. But I got involved in housing. I didn't start out that way. You know how you fall into situations. I was invited to go to a workshop that they was having. Dorothy Irene Hype, Dr. Hype, with the National Council of Negro Women. And I went there, and they was asking us, what do we think, because I was an organizer, what do you think needs to happen? You know, and how can we do things to help you do whatever it is that you all want to do in your community? And we discussed that. And that's when I told them that they was trying to hook up with Mississippi State, which was talking about the extension services and all these family things. You know how they. So I told them the story about me going over to my extension services I went over there. That was before 1964 to get involved. I wanted to do something in my community, and the women said, "Let's go over here and you learn how to cook, sew, and do all that stuff, and help develop." And they told us that we're going to create. So they told me to bring a cigar box and a piece of cloth, shiny cloth, silk or satin or something like that, and some macaroni, and we was going to make jewelry boxes. Well, I got all my little stuff together, got my 50 cents, and for us it was a lot of money at that time, and bought my little cloth and had my macaroni, and I went over there, and we was all sitting around, and it dawned on me, and I asked the other ladies, I said, "Do you have any jewelry?" And they said, "No." Well, I know I didn't have none. My question is, what is I'm doing sitting here making jewelry boxes and no jewelry? And then I got up, got my macaroni and my box, come home and cooked my macaroni, and I ain't been back, you know what I'm saying? And so I told them this story, and the extension service people were there working with the Miss Hike was saying, "Now see, what we're trying to let you all understand what's relevant to us." Well, they drew a picture up on the wall, and this woman got up and she explained it was a girl and a boy, and a husband and a wife, and we looked at it. But I said, that don't fit us. And then they said, then she come in some kind of figures of 1 point something child. You understand what I'm talking about? And as we said, well, you don't go to the community and talk this. People think we're crazy. You don't have 1 point something zero child, And so that was how I started with this process of getting involved, was explaining. This is not that Miss Hike was edging us on because she wanted to know what we talked about in terms of organizing people. And I said, that we're going to have another way of getting to people instead of this. And the issue of housing came up. And it was one of the list of things, the question I told them to ask people what is it they think they need. One thing was housing, and so on, and went on down the line. So I started off saying, okay, we did that, and then the fella and the mayor of New Orleans, we was the three speakers. So I told him, make me last, please, because these is very distinguished men, and they all laughed. But I was telling them, that we got to get relevant, to what's really needed at a place and at a time.
I think maybe I think we're going to take about another half hour because that'll give you some time, and we have to get back.
Well, I'm sorry that it all come up at this date. When I was talking to the young lady, I said, "Oh my Lord, I know I got to go down there and stand before these folks and talk about African American women and women of color in politics, and what do? We have to see about the children, the family, and the husbands, and so on."
There's a lot to
and
do.
how do all that fit in?
But I think I think in saying that we also have to realize that that we probably need to do some more interviewing at some point too, and we'll try to, so that we won't look at this as trying to cover everything.
Okay.
So I think, Neil, we wanted to kind of start with coming back to this town.
Yeah. I was curious. This, if I understand, this was the first town in the county that was incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious why you saw that as a need and how you went about doing that. What were your thoughts and objectives and hopes and goals?
Well, I was working with the housing program of the National Council of Negro Women, And earlier, leaving from all these different eras of the 60s and the 70s and that kind of type thing, I got involved in trying to do the first homeownership program in this nation outside of an Indian reservation, which it was one in New Mexico. I went down to look at that. And so the first homeownership program was done in Gulfport, Mississippi. So it was a pilot kind of type thing, and that's some of the stuff that we put together of how could we have government and foundation organizations such as the National Council of Negro Women and everything involved. So I had been doing that of housing, coming up with the subsidy. The idea was to take the subsidy from public housing, and which is the highest subsidy, and put it into an opportunity for the people to own their own home. And then if we was going to build new kinds of housing, they would be single-family units in some places, and we put in housing in St. Louis, which was townhouses because of the land question. So it was that kind of thing. But after President Johnson signed the Housing Act in 1968, a whole lot of things, you know, that I got involved with around that, because I know we needed some housing, that's for sure. And so we put 200 units in Gulfport, Mississippi. After that, we wanted to do something in the Mississippi Delta, and that's where we had to get a referendum passed. It was not going to be passed because the same people who did not want the houses was the voters. They were still in charge of the vote. So then we got that's another piece of organizing technique, got the Attorney General to do a waiver. And the waiver was because that we were just going to do one project, and we was going to do it in Inola, Mississippi. So I put 264 units of housing, 3 and 4 and 5 bedroom homes in Inola, Mississippi, with an opportunity to come off the situation where that the government is continued to pay, where people could become homeowners and they could be taxpayers. So we sold that both to the Democrats and the Republicans. Loved it, and it was something that flew. Republicans came in, and that's sort of what I did. I was around from place to place, putting housing in the ground, and I don't know how many millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars of housing that we got into the ground. That's a long piece by itself of talking about how those organizing techniques had to come and what had to happen with that. Joe Burstein is what I call his brainchild, because he was the legal person that everything I come up with, he put it in some kind of legal terms. So you have to have, and then some things wasn't legal terms that you had to have an opinion. And then I got Weaver at that time, and then from Weaver to Rumley. So I done testified before folks and done all that kind of stuff. So people kept saying, well, you're doing all this stuff everywhere else. Why can't you do it in Marsville? And we need some housing. I said, you can't get none, you know, because you can't get these things. You don't have no water. You don't have no sewage. You don't have basic kinds of infrastructure. They said, well, how do we get that? And I said, well, you have to incorporate. Well, let's do that. Well, we went after guys again. We asked the men, would you please, you know, come and incorporate? And 2 or 3 of the men around here, they was asking them would they do that, help with that work. So I got MACE to be the entity, because and I called Larry and talked to him and said, look, we need to start incorporating some towns. People needs to be mayors and board of aldermen and so forth, because I had done found that out going around doing housing, you know, how powerful that was to get some kind of things in the ground. And so he said, all right, so we'll get Bailey, which is Attorney Bailey. He had never incorporated anything in his life, so that put this black lawyer doing something and searching that he had never had to do. But they came down here and they said, well, I said, well, we'll apply for a grant. And so we applied for a grant to start off a program. I started to talk about a program for incorporating towns. So we stuck that on the MACE. Okay? So we got the first little money to start off to say we had to have an engineer, and you had to have a lawyer, and you had to have the basic things to incorporate a town. I had to find out how much it took land to incorporate. It takes 1 square acre to incorporate. And so that was Bailey's job, to go down there to get that reading and bring it back. But my job was to find out, could we get it done. So I went to the church and asked, told people, they say, you all stay on me all the time, asking me, why can't we build houses, why can't we get these other kinds of things. One of the ways that we can do that is to incorporate the town. And so I asked the young lady in Shockett County to fill out some papers and put down the people's names, just make something like a survey list. And so she did that. And then I passed them out to 8 women, decided that they would walk from door to door and asked, put the people's name down, did they want to be incorporated? Because I learned in life, if folks don't want it, there's no use in doing it. When you get ready to organize something, you got to get a segment of people that wants it, or either that would want it. They don't have to say they want it, but they would want it, so you have to know the difference, between that. So I just wanted to get the feel, and that's what we did. And everybody signed up that they wanted to be incorporated except 2. One of them was a white preacher over there, and another was a white man around on another corner. He said the reason why they didn't sign, they didn't understand it. But they found out it was okay because the lady's dead now, Miss Van Devener. She even signed because she was the clerk. We had a segment of people that, even though we disagreed, that's the same woman that I had sued so I could register to vote. We came to the understanding that something needs to be done in the community. One of the pieces that we did was start that process of they putting their name down and doing all this, and we had the lawyers in, and then my job was to make sure that the whites show up, and because they own the land, some of the land. And I went and talked to one of the big farmers, which was Mr. L.M. Higgle, and a couple of black farmers that had a little land attached to them. And he came to the meeting. I called a meeting at the courthouse, and the whites came, and they listened, and they asked questions, and they says, we want to know, is you going to tax the house? What is the tax on the land? And I told them I'd find out and get back to them. And I called a man in that came in from Pennsylvania. That's one of the things of knowing people. That is, he came and assessed all of the land of that corporate area that we were talking about. And he set it up, what the assessment would be, and we wouldn't tax the land. We just taxed the houses. And that flew with the farmers. And then they put it on the right, the assessment right, the way that what it needed to been assessed for. And so that we had a big, we'll come to that, but he had to come and do that. So we came back and had another meeting, and I explained that to them, and they was okay. And they said, well, who's going to be the mayor? And because when you incorporate the town, you got to have a mayor and the board of aldermen. And white fella stood up in the back of the room and said, I nominate Unita to be the mayor. Because she knows what's going on and how to do this, and we have seen all the other work she's done, you know, in housing and different stuff, and we think that she would be the person to do that. And some other fellow stood up and said, second the motion, and that was the beginning. Then they said, well, who's going to be on the board? And the courthouse was packed, and some of them said, well, you need to pick them. And the black folks say, okay, and that's what happened. I chose 2 white people and 3 blacks, 2 of the most powerful people in our county, which was at that time was 1 or 2. I won't say they is the most powerful, but they was the most knowledgeable in terms of what they do. Is our postmaster. He was white, and Miss Van Der, which is the same woman that was the clerk when I went over to try to register to vote. And 3 blacks. And we started the town off in this room. And we incorporated, got all the papers put together, and sent it down. The jury signed it. We became a town December 1976. And I became the mayor, of course, in that August, because the people had decided that that's what they was going to do, but you had to put it in the paper. And I've been the mayor ever since. But it came about from, it wasn't anything here, nothing. I mean, we didn't have no streets, no toilets. Outside, we had outside, you know, shanty houses, and the whites had decent houses, but they was tired of smelling the outhouses and stuff in the summer. And I didn't know that the water backed up on them when we have seepage water from the river. It would back up in their toilets and things. But the first project that I started was to seal off, because I started even before we became incorporated, is they made me president of the Myersville Utility District. We had black and whites on that, and I became president so that we could get some water. So I raised $200,000 to get water system. We got a water system, and we turned it, by the time we finished with it, the utility district, see, all this was unfolding, that I became organizing to incorporate the town. Then we just put that over, the water district over into the town. We sold water in December. We also became the town in December. My next project was to make sure that we get sewage. So that's what I started after. And they said you couldn't do it because we was too smallly populated, and we didn't have enough clout and voters and that whole thing. I started to piecemeal money from groups, National Waters Associations, and people I knew, to give us a little seed money so I could go after the grant. The town have to have so much, so the first money we had to have was $2,500, so that we could say we had seed money, so I got that to kick off. And then we got money from the National Environment Protection. And then I found out it was money at the state level, and I got 300 and some odd thousand from the national, and I went to the state and found out that I could borrow 50,000 from the state, and then I ended up borrowing another 50,000 from the state, and then I got grants from Farmers Home Administration, so I pieced together 600 and some odd thousand dollars to put in a sewage system. People was running here and writing it up and busy, you know, because they had never seen nothing like it, you know. That I was getting $5 over here, you know, 1,000, 2,000, anything was necessary to pull it all together. And then we got the engineers and started the process of a sewage system. So we had water and sewage, which was part of the infrastructure. Then we had to have, I got $250,000 to start off to try to have fire prevention, you know, in case that we could have some houses, and I was supposed to be building houses. I was going to do the same kind of housing that I went after from HUD, because I knew the secretary of HUD in Washington, D.C. as well, so as a local person, which helped me. I knew him, so I knew what he liked. I told him to come up and sit by the river and let us talk. You know, and his father was from up this way, his white fella. He's a Republican, and they was trying to figure out, and I'm supposed to be a Democrat, how we was doing so well, white fella. And but we talked about housing, and he gave the $250,000 to try to see, could we get it? Could we get the land? The white folks that I tried to get some from went up on the price, so that cut that down. Then the county went and bought this piece out from under me that the man was going to let me have, the white fellow was going to let us have. So she trying to get it for herself. You know, rumors goes, and you have to fight all these rumors. You got to work through all that. And people who never been involved in anything like this before, and jealousies and envies and who is this? This is a woman. Who is she in the first place? And they bought the land off from under me, and then fixed it. They said so that it was just going to be for recreation. So I'll show you that. Then I had to figure out how to get a fire truck. So I just went on and bought a fire truck, but it was supposed to went with the whole other thing. The man said, "Oh, that's wrong, the regulation." I just wrote a real nice letter saying, you know, I apologize for that. I didn't know it, but you come up here and get it. The people, you tell these people in Myesville that you're coming at their truck, and so they figured out another way to rearrange that, where the truck would stay here, but one of these days we'd get some housing, you know. And I sent the rest of it back. And so the folks went up in arms. We ain't got no money in this town. They're sending money back. But I thank the federal government, you know, for somebody else could be using it while we could see, could we find some more land, you know. And we're going to sit there and try to hold it and go through a whole lot of changes. It paid off, because when I did flip back around and ask for some houses, see, I was down as a person who will send the money back if it don't work. And that's when we got the first housing in here that ever been in the county. There's never been any houses for you know, the public before, and that's the one that. And so they had named it, because I got it with an organization named the National Caucus and Center on Black Age. So I utilized that group, you know. It's Sam Simmons. He's in Washington, D.C. He's the president of it, and I knew Sam from he used to be a assistant secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and now he's heading up this organization. So I asked him, you know, so he was interested in putting 202 down here, because that's a housing for the elderly and the handicapped. So I wanted to start off trying to house the elderly, because that's the majority of the people in our community, and get them out of the house because it was overcrowded, so many people up in one house. And so they gave me 20 units, and that was the first one.
Is this the one across the street here?
Right. And when the papers hit and came to Jackson, Mississippi, it was named Unita Blackwell Estates. And I wasn't particularly happy about that, because I know that adds more jealousies and hang-ups sometime when you're trying to organize stuff. But they said I had been around housing, and had brought housing to Mississippi and to a lot of places in the United States of this caliber, and that I needed to. They just honored me by naming it. So that was the first one. I got sewage, got water, got a fire truck, got housing. then I thought about, we need to have something for families. But I wanted to use that land to put in 40 units. And I hadn't got the go-ahead that said if we get the land, we can get the 40 units.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, if you don't get 40, I asked for 40, I may end up with 25 or whatever individual housing with the opportunities for 3 and 4 and 5 bedrooms like I, had went after.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this fight from the county that we didn't let it fly. So finally they come up when it got for them with public housing. And that's what, as you enter, you see Deer River.
Yeah.
That's public housing, which I wasn't too cool on that, but I'm glad it's somewhere for people to live.
Yeah.
But we could have had a better situation.
Yeah.
The next thing I got is some more housing for the elderly, and it's called the Myersville Apartments over there. So from a place that had absolutely nothing, no streets, that's a long story how I got the streets, but the streets, so I went after trying to find money for the streets, and they tell us, we didn't have no population and we rural and so on and whatever, and I was convinced them that, it's better to keep people where they are, and they said that's not what they say, the guideline says you got to have this and that and so on. So we finally kept going, and they just got tired of looking at me, I think. They give you a cup of coffee and sit you down, and be nice to you and send you on home.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take that, drink the coffee, and come on home, come back tomorrow. Finally got the streets, and then I got the South Central Bell to come in to, I told them it'd be to their advantage to come in and find out where the telephones are. And so they drew me a map and put the streets on them and numbered the houses so they know where their telephones are. And they say, we can't do this for every little town and community. I said, I know that, but this is a developing town and community.
County seat.
And you cannot say that you can't help. He said, okay, I'll try to do that. And that's what they did. And they done a wonderful job. They set it up. And now they got a charity, because I didn't have no money to buy street signs. And so I got a charity group, and with their help, we found a group that gave us the street signs. And now we have street signs. And numbers. So we came from, I wish you could see, dirt roads and nothing. And now the people say they don't even know Myersville, because they just, Marysville is actually the pronunciation.
So incorporation then is a kind of another way of increasing local control and participation, and really fits into some of your earlier.
Well, I feel that everything that I do done is on a same chord, because I think that if people, like the local people here, the black and the white local people, went to understanding that they could take mayors and the board and use it for something that would benefit the community, instead of just people sitting somewhere with their legs crossed and says, I'm the mayor, and I'm on the board or whatever. But actually getting the needs of the people's met. And that's what I'm concerned about. What kinds of things can we do to meet the basic needs? And that our children can grow up, in a community which, I don't know, they may start tomorrow, but it's a peaceful coexistence here with the people, that sort of talks to one another, wave at one another, whether you're black or white or whatever, but they see that you, for as the people who was disfranchised, such as myself, people who were not allowed to register to vote and be a part of the political process, that now I am the mayor and I'm fair. Is that they used to use that word a lot, but I am fair. I don't just try to do just for this set of people versus another set of people. As I said to some of the white farmers, they said, "You building all this stuff and doing this, and how is this going to benefit me?" I says, "Well, you work these people, and you do all these things, and you'll see it will benefit you, because I'm not really concerned too much about you because you got this element, and I'm honest with you, but the streets, you can drive on them, and you like them." He said, "Yeah." I said, "Is anything backing up in your house?" "No." "It's okay. You get that piece that you need, and they need it more. That's all the difference. And you're going to pay for it one way or the other anyway." And that's what's happening in our cities and towns and right now across this country with all of the uprisings and the shootings and the killings, is because that we didn't stop and do it where it was supposed to have been done.
Well, that was the other thing that was rather striking about your conversation on this incorporation, was back in 75 or 76. I mean, you were nominated for mayor, as I understand it, by a white person, and then seconded by a woman who had at one point attempted to prevent your registering for...
No, it wasn't seconded by her.
Okay.
No, I just said that she was there.
I see.
And what she was saying was, what they do is that you didn't get that opposition of saying that we didn't need to be incorporated when I was sending people around to ask about the incorporation.
But that seems like a fairly major shift in attitude at minimum between...
I feel that the shift in the attitude is human nature. Whenever something, the white people, I freed more white people in my community, I think, than in places I've worked, as much as I did blacks, because white people didn't, they felt they couldn't say anything. And if they said something, that would cut them off from their people, and it was the whole freeze out of their children going to school and been called a nigger lover and called all these things. But when it got to the place, it was the law, because that we sued so many people. I sued everybody in the state of Mississippi because you couldn't walk out the door here. I had to sue the highway patrol and everybody. And then it freed. We had all these lawsuits pending. And in this county right now, the lawsuit still stands because they denied us this right to register to vote, and it's still there. And so those are the kind of things in the schools, everything. So they had to, it's not that they're so great and arms open to us or anything, but that attitude change come from what the law says versus what is economically feasible at the time. And when in comes the money of the Head Start programs and all these other things that we could go into sunflower stores and to all these other stores, the food stamps, they've started off to fighting us about the food stamps, and then they finally give up on that when they found out they was going to be the recipient of the food stamps. I'm saying that it stops when we talk about economics. That's the shift, the economic power and the law is the two that I feel that changes any country.
Jobs for people, and there, as you said somewhere, I think in something I read, if there was work here for people, there's a lot of people that'd be moving back out of the cities back down to Myersville to live.
That's right.
They like it. They like the people, their family and stuff.
Right.
What? Maybe you could just talk a little bit about the strategies for economic growth. I mean, you've been involved in that since MACE, even. Economic development and getting businesses and new ways. What's your? Maybe you can talk a little about the history of things you have tried to do, and then speculate a little bit about what needs to be done in that area.
Okay. Well, I think that when we found out through voter registration and all these kind of things that we had to deal with an economic base, and then how was people going to have jobs if the mechanization has taken over? What would that mean? And then people was put off the plantation and found out, and so on. So we had to come up with some other means, and through, for instance, when we created MACE, that was a tool of leadership, so people could go to understanding what do all this mean, and how do that affect your daily living, and how do you live. And out of that, we did Delta Foundation. That was another piece that we went after forward money, and asked for forward money, so that we could set up an entity. Because see, at first, Ford just used to send their money down. Then we came up with a foundation. I'm one of the founders of that too. That the Delta Foundation of setting up a foundation here in the Mississippi Delta, so that we could then take money and find ways of how that we can develop an economic base. Then we set up a stamp factory and the blue jean factory, and people are still working at this blue jean factory and the stamp factories and telephones and so forth, and doing all kinds of things. So I'm saying that out of this we went as far as we could go in terms of that limitation. Then when we talk about setting up towns, like Marysville is the one way we say it, and Myersville is another way we say it. That either way is correct. So the town people may say Myersville or Marysville or whatever. So what when you come to a place like this, that all of the cotton and everything else is still going on, people are doing some, but what kind of economic base could we have? So we started after trying to develop a saying in our communities. We needed something besides just the cotton fields and whatever. The Alaska plant that's in Rolling Fork, Mississippi, should have been here. Okay, that we're talking about things that happened before now, and it didn't come because the farmers at that time did not want something to come in and make more money than what they were paying on the farms. Then the other piece was that they said that they're going to have to hire blacks. And for a long time, the state of Mississippi wouldn't even receive federal money on the kind of, wouldn't even receive it to work on the highways. That's the reason we were so far behind in highways, because that we broke open the first money that came in through Head Start programs and all these kinds of things, federal money, that Mississippi started taking money. So now Mississippi takes more federal money than most of the states. But I'm saying that kind of a trend is not only that we hope just our own people as black people, but we hope Mississippi by being able to say, we can take federal money to generate jobs and start this whole process moving. Where I am at this particular point in Marysville, Mississippi, is I don't know exactly where it's going to come from. I'm just out here searching and trying to fit and put this piece together and that piece together, of saying how many jobs can we generate and that kind of type thing. A lot of things has come up. They first was going to put in a nuclear plant or something, some kind of plant up in the upper part of the county. The people had a big fight over it, saying, whether it's going to have it or it wasn't going to have it. And the vote came and they won out. That is not going to have it. Then in comes the gambling issue. And so the state of Mississippi wasn't going to have gambling. Now that they decided that they let it do the counties vote whether they was going to have it or not. When the vote came down, the one on the coast and us was the only two in the state that voted. Issaquah County voted to have gambling. So now everybody else found out that we might get rich, I guess, or something. And everybody's now done voted straight down this river, because they got more resources than we have, like Vicksburg and Greenville now done voted, and Tunica opened up a casino, and all these things is done happen. You see what I'm saying? But people was just saying, okay, I'll take anything to try to generate jobs. But we had tried one time to get an aspirin factory, because at that time you could do the same skills of picking cotton, because you had to count the aspirins. It wasn't automated or anything. And so we've tried several kinds of things. And if anybody, anywhere, realize what done happened in these cities, if they don't, I can say that it's people that come from these little small towns that went to the Los Angeleses and all these other places, that they're having these uprisers and packed into these areas with low skills because that we were not trained and put in those predicaments, and then turn around and there's no leadership of explanation of why, because it just said you in Los Angeles. Well, the big folks in Los Angeles looks big, you know, but here's another group out there don't have anything. And then when all this, and they sit there and get angrier and angrier because you there where Hollywood is, you know, and where all the glamour and where all the everything is. And then you sitting over here don't have hardly bread to eat, or if you do have it, you know, you got to lean on the side or do it unjust or some kind of other thing. I think that people should stay in these little small towns if they want to, that we should develop these small towns, come up with enough plants or satellite industries or whatever we can do to keep people where they know their neighbors and their friends and their children can grow up. We should have an education system that educate people, you know, if they want to be educated. Up to a point, if they want to go to college, somebody pay for it, sure, they need to pay for it. But I'm saying that we should feel in our country, great as the United States is, that we could do these things, and it's time for us to reorder our priorities in terms of let's build our small communities, let people know who their neighbors are, our morals would be different, that we would care about one another, and the people say, well, you know, one thing about little small towns, everybody tend to everybody else's business, but also everybody keep everybody straight a little bit better, you know. And I think it's, you know, it's bad in one way and good in another one. And I said, but out of that, I think that would help a great deal. So the Myersvilles of this nation and people who wants to live here left because they had to go to Los Angeles, or they had to go to Chicago, or they had to go somewhere looking for the job. And it's more migrants in terms of black folks, of course you already know that possibly, that any history of people. We've done more migration than anybody that they can think of that's coming from all these other countries or anything. And so just moving from the south, going to the west, going to the north, looking for a better place. And that's what I feel that, as I've talked to Fortune magazines and different ones, you know, talking about what we're going to do about the jobs, and people ask me what I think needs to do about jobs. I think we should come up with satellite and finding jobs that actually fit the people in the local community. You know, we always training for something that's not there. You know, and I think that if you got, say, in a town like this one, which is 526 people, I said, because a baby was born last week, then you know everybody. I know everybody. I know who will work, who won't work, what will happen, you know. And if we say that we go into towns that's got 50,000 people, it's a lot of people know these people, and we cut them up into precincts and so on, you know. Who is it that needs to work? What is this all about? You know, and I feel that we just got to reorganize America. You know, that's just a fact. And the South is one of the areas that I think that has more hope in terms of that, because we didn't get so feeling that we had so much. Yeah. You know, yet we felt we had our culture and our the black had their culture, the white had their ways. But it sounds strange, but we seem to be the only stabilizing group, you know. If we didn't like you, white people didn't like you in the South, you knew it. You know, they didn't grin in your face and cut your throat. That's the reason we're having these so-called riots in some of these other places. Now, that's my opinion, because it was an illusion. See, I've never been under an illusion. I knew that if I step out the door, I should be shot at. So I took care of myself, you know. And I never felt that folks was with me and got so upset when they wasn't, because I never thought they was. That's what some of this is all about.
Yeah.
It's the setting up of an illusion and a hypocritical way of saying. And one thing, and I don't know whether we're turning into that in the South, but I feel that the Southern way, people there used to ask me, why didn't you ever go north? I said, well, you know, I just didn't feel like living on a whole lot of lies. You understand what I'm talking about? I just know where I am, and this is it. And I love Mississippi. You know, I love home, and I built it. You know, we put our sweat, blood, and tears, and I just go on, you know, telling them. I said, I just haven't taken over my deeds yet, you know, but I built the place, you know. So it's that kind of feeling, because I love the land, and there's a lot of people that's in these cities, that's in these tall buildings, love the land, you know, and they feel different and free when they out where you know the wind can blow, and they actually can see the stars at night and the moon. You know, I had a friend of mine came down and she said, "Oh my God, there's the moon." She's from New York, and there's real stars. You know, they don't get a chance to see those things that much. You know, so I really feel that for me to be the mayor of Marysville, it's been an interesting time. I have enjoyed it, and it hasn't been easy. And sometimes I attribute that I'm now having attacks of high blood pressure. As a man told me the other day, I said that comes from being the mayor. But some people say it's eating too much. But anyway, I will find my peace is by the river. You know, I love this river. I've always been on this river. And so I'll be out there looking for some kind of plant or something, any little something that don't take away from the town. You know, we got to have things that leaves the good things intact.
Yeah.
You know, just if it's something that takes away from it, it's not worth it.